Good evening, and welcome to the Monday, April 21st meeting of the MSAD 51 Board of Directors. I'm sorry, it's like looking into the sun up here, so you may have a couple of pauses from my colleagues. Let's see, we are going to begin our meeting tonight with a recognition. Mar-E, are you going to be introducing this? Outstanding.
Hi, everyone. I don't see our ADL advisors here. They had told me that they were going to have some students here to talk a little bit about what they do with the ADL programming. So I'm not sure where they are, but that's who we're recognizing tonight. And so ADL is the Anti-Defamation League. We've had a long-standing relationship with them for at least 10 years anyway. And they come in and they train our students. Students apply to be part of the program. It's a pretty popular program to get involved with, and they apply and are accepted, and they receive intensive training over 4 school days. And in that training, they learn how to be peer leaders. And then they go into our 6th grade health classes. It's 7th and 8th graders who are trained, and they go into our 6th grade health classes and do peer lessons with their younger classmates. And it's kind of something that students look forward to being part of, and they're leaders in our school. So I'm not sure where they are today, but.
That's okay. Well, we appreciate you filling us in on that and the important work that the students are doing. Any questions by the board? Jeff, anything that you want to weigh in on?
No, I know it's, as Marby mentioned, it's a program that's been going on for a long time in our district, and it's, we're very happy to have a program for our middle schoolers, and it's part of our complete equity approach way before we talked about it as a district. So if they come in, I assume we can recognize them at that time.
We will immediately stop and recognize them. So thank you very much. The second thing that we have, the second item that we have under recognition is recognition for girls indoor track. Looking, do we have any representatives? Beautiful. So Representative Steve Moriarty was supposed to be here as well this evening, but he sent a letter in his place, and if I can read this, to the SAD 51 Board of Directors and members of the community. I had planned to be with you tonight to make this presentation to the girls' track team in recognition of their championship season, but I learned on Thursday that today's unexpected session of the legislature could likely extend into the evening. I will be thinking of you tonight and offer my congratulations and best wishes. Sincerely, Representative Steve Moriarty. And this is the document that he prepared from the state of Maine. Be it known all that we, members of the Senate and House of Representatives, join in recognizing the Greeley High School girls track team of Cumberland, which won the Class B state championship, the team's 3rd state championship title in 6 years. Members of the team, the roster of which has only 10 athletes, including Olivin Marsankis, Tori Bacall, Elise Preventure, and Jenny Medrano, all of whom scored for the team at the competition, and also Elle Jowett, Abigail Jacobson, and Leah Traficante, each of whom scored in more than one event. We extend our congratulations and best wishes, and be it ordered that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 130th Legislature and the people of the state of Maine. Mr. Shapiro, would you like to come up and accept this? With any members of the team that are present, please.
Oh, no.
Well, I want to see you climb up, yeah.
you would introduce yourselves and tell them what events that you competed in at the States. Please and thank you.
Hi, I'm Elise Provencher, and I competed in the 400-meter dash at States.
Hello, I'm Abigail Jacobson, and I competed in the 200-meter and the 55-meter.
Hi, I'm Abby Lennox, and I was an alternate for the relay.
And that's all we have tonight, as many of them are doing outdoor track as well. But what is particularly special about this state championship is these three only had 4 others with them. There were 7 that qualified. So the Magnificent 7 brought home the state championship at the state meet. So that was outstanding performance for that small group of very well trained and outstanding student athletes. So well done. You represent us well. Nice job.
Okay, our next item for action is the approval of minutes for March 21st. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand.
I abstain.
And 1 abstention. My apologies. The next item for action is the approval of the April 4th, 2022 minutes. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstentions?
Abstention.
We have 2 abstentions. Excellent, thank you. That moves us forward toward public comment. As a reminder, you can have up to 3 minutes to say what is on your mind. If anybody would like to speak, the podium is awaiting you. All right. Communications. Anyone on the board have anything to? Oh, oops, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was getting ready.
Oh, of course.
I didn't know how to run. Hi.
It's tough to go first.
Yeah. My name is Pasha Marlowe, 15 Country Charm, if I need to do that. I'm a mental health professional, previous high school theater department head, and parent of a rising freshman here at Greeley. I'm here to encourage the budget to include a full-time theater director or theater teacher. I recognize that a part-time theater teacher has just been added to the budget, but I still want to state my case. Even more than music and art, which we have full-time teachers for at Greeley, theater directly teaches empathy and tolerance of others in community. When you're acting, you are literally walking in another person's shoes. Outside of teaching, acting, directing, playwriting, set, lighting, design, participation in the theater arts has also been known to increase confidence, verbal and social skills, and motivation to stay in school. On a more serious note, I believe that theater is suicide prevention. Recent studies show that 1 in 4 high school girls reported that they had seriously contemplated attempting suicide, 1 in 8 for boys. Studies show that 25% of high school students recently identify as LGBTQ+, and nearly half of all of LGBTQ+ teens say they have contemplated suicide. As a theater and mental health professional, I have heard time and time again that the only time students, especially those who identify as LGBTQ+, feel safe, accepted, and celebrated is when they are participating in the empathetic environment of the theater. Theater teachers and directors become cheerleaders, mentors, and second parents to kids. Like for many, theater was my family, my safe haven growing up, and I say with complete certainty that my high school theater department saved my life. I have the unique perspective as a mental health professional here in town. I have personally talked with students at Greeley who identify in the theater and LGBTQ community who say that it is only when they're with other theater kids that they truly feel a safe of acceptance and belonging. I have spoken to kids here at Greeley that say participating in Rent recently literally kept them motivated to stay in school. One student said, "It saved her life." I imagine this is true for other students who do not feel safe expressing the depths of their depression and anxiety. Having only a part-time position and a theater club does not meet the extreme mental health needs of our students, nor does it fully utilize our beautiful new arts facility or support the incredible talent here, the students of Greeley, who would be able to participate in theater if it were offered as classes more frequently during the day. Greeley thankfully values arts enough to employ 7 full-time music teachers, 5 full-time visual arts teachers. Unfortunately, the district does not employ a single full-time theater teacher. Unlike surrounding high schools that have full-time theater teachers, including Yarmouth, Freeport, Falmouth, Greeley students do not have the opportunity to benefit from a full-time theater curriculum or even participate in regional theater competitions like the ones currently won by students at Yarmouth, Freeport, and Falmouth. I understand that many on the board do support finding space in the budget for a full-time theater teacher, and I hope that you'll find a way sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Holly Seddon. I'm a Cumberland resident. I just want to echo what Pasha said and also offer this. Critical thinking, problem solving, humility, the ability to act and react under pressure, empathy, compassion, executive function, teamwork, composure, confidence, and time management. These are all skills highly valued by employers. These are all skills necessary for adult life. These are the skills theater teaches us. It is short-sighted for our community and our district to not have a full-time theater teacher. Almost 15 years ago, I sat in a play rehearsal with a high school freshman who was failing math. She had long since given up. To her, there was no point, no connection. As I sat designing the set for the play we were rehearsing, I started explaining to her the amount of math it took to calculate the needs for the set, the stair stringers, the platforms, the backdrops. Eventually, it clicked, and she was willing to go back and try again. She may never be a math whiz, but that freshman is now a 30-year-old who has an appreciation for geometry and understands its relevance and connection to her craft. While theater and math are interconnected at so many places, it is essential to meet our students and connect with them and draw them in however we can. I believe that a full-time theater teacher and a robust theater program as part of our curriculum is essential in connecting and drawing in every single student in the Greeley schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Leanne Candora, North Yarmouth. I just want to add a couple notes. Thank you, Pasha and Holly, for speaking about the importance of theater. I was going to start actually with mentioning the ADL program. My 7th grader was thrilled to be accepted into that program this year and learned so much in those few days that they were able to participate. And I really appreciate and value that programming in our schools and hope that there's other, I know there's a lot of other offerings in addition to that one programming. And I'm really happy that my child, who's also a theater geek, so this is where I'm going to make the connection. So as a peer leader in the middle school, one of the other ways that they like to participate is through theater and the arts. And they came out for the middle school theater this year, and there were so many kids, there were 60 or 70 plus kids who showed up for that after school program at the middle school level, that they didn't participate because there was way too many kids. And so luckily there's the other community programming that they're now in. The Cumberland County Children's Theater is performing Beauty and the Beast over the next 2 weekends, and there's a number of Greeley students who are in that production, including kids who are in Rent as well. And so I'm also here to speak in support of looking to further support the drama programming in the district. There's definitely the interest in, echoing all the comments of Holly and Pasha, and I'm sure others. I think it's such an important asset to utilize the space and all the skills of our students, so thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Then moving us forward, thank you for taking the time to come in and speak this evening. Communications, anybody on the board? Go ahead, Mike.
Just a quick one, an update from a previous discussion we had at the board about pursuing a project to build a large solar field that would power our school district. We've since had a tripartite meeting, a meeting of the school board, the town of Cumberland, and the town of North Yarmouth at the town hall. What was it, 2 weeks ago, Jason, or so? There's already efforts underway to start looking at siting, discussions about how we would develop an RFQ, request for something, or request for proposal.
RFQ,
Thank
yep.
you, an RFQ. And so that's moving along really nicely, and so we're hopeful that this will continue to move along and we can have something in place over the next couple months where we could actually start to talk about it fully as a real proposal presentation. Jason, did you want to add anything?
The only thing that I guess I'd add that came out of that, the group that was involved was amazing and highly skilled. I'm excited about it, but one key point that came out of that is that we don't have to necessarily tie in whatever we do in North Yarmouth on the school building itself, if anything, with this project. They can live separately, and I personally hope that we can do both. So that was it.
Thank you. Anybody else on the board want to weigh in? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mike and Jason. That leads us to the first of two presentations. And Mr. Shapiro, we'll be handing back over to you for the Greeley football sanctioning recommendation.
I would invite you guys to come down with me. Please and thank you. No need to fly solo here tonight, right? Come on down. And it's a free country. We'll let you speak if you want to. So, come on down. It's a good thing that we, those are your middle school uniforms, I take it? And some of them have outgrown them, so that's a great thing. That's a good start for our football program. So I'm going to give you a quick history here on where we were. So 4 years ago, we had our own program. We were a highly competitive 11-player football program. I don't believe even 8-man existed at the time. Our numbers were low. We finished our last game in a playoff game. We won our first round with 17 kids. And then we went on and played Marshwood, and we played real tight for about 3 quarters, and we just ran out of gas. We simply didn't have the numbers to sustain it. And at that point, we had a number of kids graduate, and in order to sustain the program and keep playing, we formed a co-op with football with Falmouth. And we were very appreciative of the efforts that they made to help us, any of our kids who wanted to play football, to still do so. It goes without saying that football is a unique sport. It is not for everyone. It is a sport that requires a great deal of work even before you even touch the field to play. And we talked at length about embracing the grind that is football. We said that, our prior coach, David Higgins, did a wonderful job of getting them prepared to play. We talked about how they didn't really like him that much on Monday through Thursday. But Friday nights, they loved him because our community came out, they supported our program, and we competed really, really well. But they really had to put in a lot of work to do that. So that was in 2018 was our last year. And then the last 4 years we've been with Falmouth, and last year at this time we had a meeting with some of these students and their parents inquiring about, hey, can we have our own team last year? And we had a good number of folks show up. We talked about how many we needed to have, but at that point we had 12 wide receivers sign up for football. That doesn't quite make a football team, so we continued with our co-op. And then again this year, this is a couple of months ago, this is education-based athletics at its finest. This all started with a position paper that was written by one of our student athletes. He sent that directly to me from his English class, extolling the benefits of having football, extolling the benefits of having our own team here, and the sense of community that brings with it, having our own program. And it really struck a chord. And I said, okay, the next steps are, that's one person's position. You're going to have to show me some numbers. A week later, yep, I had 25 kids written down on a piece of paper. I said, okay, that too is nice, but there's a few more steps we're going to have to go through. Lo and behold, we're going to have a meeting with anybody who's interested, and we did so for all current 7th through 11th graders. And we had 50-plus people, 50 students show up to that, as well as some parents. And again, we talked about the depth and breadth of what we needed to do in order to make this happen. And a lot of it was the hard work that they're going to have to put in. And it is whether or not these folks want to have that happen. And clearly that interest is there. And so we had another meeting the subsequent week, and we met in the weight room. And we talked again about the work that you're going to have to do, and they're going to have to become familiar with that weight room, because it is a staple of football, is to be in the weight room in your off season to do some training. And we talked candidly about what some of the concerns we had about having our own program. Again, this is going to be 8-player football, so we don't need as many students. There is a place for us to do so. We'd be in the large class 8-player football. And one of the things that we did talk about candidly was, if this doesn't work, if we go belly up, we'll never have football again. So that's a risk that we're going to have to take if we're going to go forward with this. We are not going to be able to have a co-op with Falmouth. We'll have burned that bridge. They were gracious to us. They're going to go do their own thing. If we're going to do this, we're on our own, and we got to make it work. And so we talked about that. And, you know, we had a show of hands. Are we going to do that? There was some trepidation in the room. Some of the students were concerned that they may have played their last football game. That possibility exists if we're not able to make this work. But I am really confident in what we've been able to do thus far. We've had 20 plus, even though we're in a spring season right now, and many of these kids are multi-sport athletes, and that's why not all of them are here. We still had 20 show up in the weight room. So we've already started a lifting club at the school, and they've been showing up already to do that. We've conducted interviews for our coaches. We had 4 really highly skilled quality candidates, and we went through the interview process for head coaches. There's a lot of work that goes into before the season even starts at what we're going to do this summer in advance of having a season in the fall. And a lot of those things we've been able to accomplish so far. We've talked with the boosters about a budget. We've been able to instill in the current budget process the coaching stipends, and then the remainder of the costs associated with football would be borne by the boosters. That's an athletic trainer, that's the EMTs, it's uniforms, it's practice gear, all that stuff will be borne, as it had been historically anyways, by the boosters. That is one of our programs that has been sustained, not just an enrichment, but a sustained. We don't have it without the boosters, much like we do for ice hockey. So all of those things have taken place. There is a place for us. We've been informed by the we've informed the MPA of our goals to have a team. We've been included in the scheduling process for the fall, and our last step, or one of our next step, is for you all to sanction our program, so that they may be able to reap the benefits of what we consider to be the ultimate team sport. And we're hopeful that these kids who have that unique perspective on wanting to play this particular sport will have that chance to do so wearing the kind of uniforms that they have on right now and out here on Friday nights. And that's a big draw for them. They're pretty excited about it. So that's our presentation. I'll certainly open the floor if any of you have anything you'd like to add. Anybody? No? Okay, they're just going to be quiet and get their work done. That's fine. One last chance. No? Okay. Any questions you all have of them or me?
Yeah, so we'll do questions with you here. Our item for action is following the public hearing, but while the student athletes and you are here, please, Jennifer.
Let me get this just right. So just to be kind of forthright in everything, my son Owen played for Falmouth this year as a freshman. And I think and my husband's the head of the boosters for football, but really, as a mother, I'm really concerned that if Greeley doesn't give this our all and do it well for the safety of our kids, that, you know, I think that if we're going to move forward, we have to do it right. We have to do it now, and we have to do it each week and have the commitment there. Falmouth has a spectacular program. They have the facilities, they just like opened their arms to us. We walked in, you know, they were there all summer, lifting, practicing, and everything. So, you know, I really think it's great that we're gonna bring it, we could possibly, with the vote tonight, bring it back to Greeley and have it here on Friday nights. I just wanna make sure that there's a commitment from the school, the athletic director, the kids, and everything to make it right so we can keep it. And, you know, and it's a big, heavy lift for the boosters on fundraising, so I know that they're highly committed to bringing it and keeping it here. So I think what I'm looking for is just to make sure that everyone is all in. And I hope this is, I know that we've burned the bridge with Falmouth, so I think we sit here tonight, this is really our only option. And let's make it right, and let's do everything. Let's have the best, you know, keep the weight room clean. Let's have the best weight room. Let's, you know, the best. I want the football players to make sure they are well respected and leaders in our school. And, you know, they bring the other kids to come play with them so we get the biggest team we can and we're as competitive as possible. We lost a lot of kids, or a few kids that either went to other schools, I think, to play football in high school, and also kids that didn't want to travel to Falmouth. And this is their time to come back and come under the wing of really good leaders that played with Falmouth and can bring their skills here. So, thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, David?
Sure. And I would say, you know, the commitment that we've seen thus far has been outstanding. And I think there's going to be a groundswell of support, I think. I'm confident that this group can pull it off, mostly because of them. And I think we have a pretty good coach in the mix, too.
Thank you. Peter.
Well, I came in here tonight with the intention to not support this, which had nothing to do with really the football program, the efforts of the boosters, the effort of these fine young men up here. I am just very, very concerned about the total imbalance in this district that, you know, we've got, we want to add another athletic program. We've got people out there as far as the advocating for the turf field. And then we've got this $11 million facility that we have built, and granted that COVID has put a damper on it, but we have totally underutilized and supported the drama programs in this town. I think we've got to start with the position we're putting in, but we've got this beautiful facility. The drama program hasn't, in my opinion, been supported by a lot of the administration. There has been totally zero coordination with the drama department, with some of the other areas within there. We've got this facility, and so I was in kind of a dumb move saying, okay, I'm going to send a message out here. If we don't clean up Dodge City as far as this drama department and getting this going through a first-class thing, I'll torch the football program. But that's very short-sighted. It's the wrong thing to do. It isn't fair to you folks. You're very dedicated. Hard to believe that I actually played football in high school, but I was awful. But I just want to, and I've only got 2 more months on this board, but consider the thing that that I'm going to see that Dodge City is cleaned up and the drama department gets the attention and everything that they deserve that they haven't gotten. So, end of speech.
Thank you, Peter. Go ahead, Jason.
I won't necessarily connect the two together, but over the last 30 or 40 years, I've sort of been disappointed how extracurricular things at times have gone away and then they never come back. So I'm very pleased to see this. I would echo what you've said and what Jennifer has said about the importance of this, and I hope that you players out there take that to heart, that this is a one-shot deal, and if it fails, it's going to be decades before this conversation happens again. So I hope you guys work hard at it, and I appreciate Friday night football. There's many things in the community that are great to gather for, and Friday night football is one of them. So I'd like to see it back here. I do have a couple of questions maybe you can answer. So as compared to the costs a few years ago, how does this compare? Total cost, I added up what's on the sheet here to nearly $52,000. And I see that, you know, like 20 of that comes from the school and 30 of it comes from the boosters. So another question I have is how do we figure out how that is broken up? And then what is huddle and the importance of that, stats and film? That's it.
Okay, so you saw probably a portion of a detailed budget then, what some of those things were. And it's a really simple math. So the district has borne the responsibility of paying for the coaching staff, and everything else was on the boosters. And I have a budget that we constructed. We had, every year a budget was submitted. The head coaching staff would submit their budget to the boosters and say, hey, these are the things that we need. So that's all black and white, you know, much like any of our other booster organizations. Okay, this is a little bit different because they sustain the program. You know, it's budget-based. What does the district pay for first? And then beyond that, what are the things that we need? And those are the responsibilities of the boosters.
Yeah. So as far as the
huddle is the filming mechanism they use that's a huge teaching tool in football. All the schools, actually all football schools use it.
Okay. So it's important to note, I guess, that the cost to the school system is 20 grand, and then our very, very generous boosters will be picking up the rest.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
So I do have a question, but I first wanted to respond to your comments, Peter, because it's not lost on me that we have members of our community in their public comment talking about supporting the theater program. And we also have a presentation about football, but I don't think this is a dichotomy where it's either or. I think we need to be supporting both of these things. And I appreciate, Holly said, listing those learning outcomes that are associated with a theater education. As I see that list, or I hear that list, and several of those, you could say the exact same thing about football. Things like teamwork and communication. These are things that are developed through athletics. So I think it's critical that we're supporting both of these tracks. So getting to my question, I don't really know a whole lot about 8-on-8 football. What does the competitive landscape look like? Specifically, if we're competing against schools or districts with more mature programs, are we going to be going in at a disadvantage? And what does that mean for player safety if we're competing against schools and districts that have been doing this for a long time?
That's a great question, and the short answer is there are no schools that have been doing this a long time. 8-player football is really new to the state of Maine, and it's also one of the it's the biggest growth sport that we have. So I think sometime over the next 5 or 10 years, there will be more 8-player teams than there are 11-player teams. So we are, candidly, we're right in the mix. So part of the homework was to talk to current programming, talk to my colleagues, athletic directors and coaches, okay, where would we be in the mix? Knowing, and this is also from our Falmouth folks too, about what we have coming back, what's been in the pipeline, talking with our youth folks, for that very question of, is this a safe endeavor for us to get into? And that's why 11-player is not, that's not on the table. We would not, one of the reasons why our program crashed, candidly, is because our freshmen had to play varsity football. And that was too big of an ask. They were not physically developed well enough to be able to compete at that level because our numbers dictated they had to play. So we would be I'd say we'd be right in the mix. 8-player football is a little different. If you have a couple really good athletes, football players, and you can supplement them with some other kids and teach the game well, you're going to be able to be successful. And I already know from what we have coming back, we have some size and athleticism and some football IQ that would probably put us right in the mix to be a competitive program right off the bat.
Thank you.
And the other piece too is that if our numbers hold, we will also be able to play sub-varsity football, even at the 8-player level. And that's something that the state as a whole does a really good job when we schedule. So the opponent, normally you play an opponent Friday, and then on Monday you would play their JV team. It doesn't have to be that same team. We will find a team for those kids to be able to develop. That is what the JV program is for. There could be 3 teams show up on a Monday at a particular site, again, for that opportunity for them to get repetitions and play the game at an appropriate level. So that's a big piece of why 8-player would be the right spot for us. That's a good question, yeah.
Can I add something? Just to add also, David, to assist Tom's question is, look, we've been very successful in our youth program in the past in being very competitive. So the boys that are sitting up there that were in the middle school, they were very successful in their in the middle school and in their youth programs and won a lot of their league and were on top for most of it. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Jeff or Scott, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I'd like to say, certainly I'm very supportive of sanctioning the football program. I know there was a lot of questions. I did attend Mr. Shapiro's informational night where there were probably at least 25 to 30 students in the room. Many of the parents were there as well, very supportive, filling in the cafeteria a few weeks ago. And we've been talking about the possibility for about a year now of bringing back the football program if the numbers were there. So I think this is an excellent opportunity. And I think the good thing here is that students drove this. The players are ready. The students here and the students that weren't able to come tonight are very vested, and I think that's what Mr. Shaviro had asked for, is to show me some investment, weight room and the energy around it, and there's a lot of energy. And I'm very supportive of bringing the football program. I don't think that we wanted to lose it a few years ago, but because of numbers we had to and safety. And I want to also just publicly thank Falmouth for graciously accepting our students over the last 4 years. They've done an amazing job, and I have nothing to say but thank you to the Falmouth schools for, even though they're often our rivals, in this case they were very much our friend. And I want to thank them very much for their extending the olive branch to us and the graciousness. So, and I just want to also say that our administration here supports both the athletics, the arts, and everything in between. And I don't see, like Tom said, I don't see the two as one, we have to support one or the other. We can support both, and we have over the years at different times. In football, your time has come, and I can see that there's probably some time for homework as well, and some yawns, and I'm sure, I know some of you were involved in sports earlier today, so we'll let you go soon. But just want to say thank you to the students especially, and for coming forward and saying we really do want this program.
Thank you. It's, as a few of my colleagues have said, it isn't either or. Hey, is the student who wrote the position paper up there with you? Throw your hand up.
I don't know if they want to be, there you go. All right, yes he is.
Nice work.
That's Brady Vancouver.
The other connection piece between Pasha, Holly, and Leanne, these are not different from each other, and ideally some of you folks up there would be able to use some of those exact skills that Holly talked about that will augment what you do on the athletic field and prepare you for life. So thank you for taking the time to come in and talk about this. We will have this for an item for action later this evening if homework doesn't get in your way, folks.
Could we move it out?
Yeah.
We can take it out of order if you...
You're the boss.
Well, I do feel very powerful, yes.
Let them
So
go
why
home
don't
and
we-
do their homework.
Yes. So why don't we do this? I would be looking for a recommendation to approve the sanctioning of the Greeley football program as recommended by the superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
And a second. Any questions or conversation from the board? Anything that you'd like to weigh in on?
No, the sanctioning tonight is MPA required, so the board of the district that wants to start a new program, obviously it's a restart for us, but it's considered new since there's been a lapse in time. But start the official process, which we can then hire a head coach. We have advertised for the position, we have applicants in the wings, but we cannot move forward until the board makes a decision. And then all other efforts to get the program going for the fall have begun in hopes that the board would vote tonight, but a lot of other things can't really start until this vote. So this is a very important vote for the program to get started.
Thank you.
And previous iterations of the budget already had a $20,000 placeholder in there, right?
We have a placeholder for the funds in the budget in
Yep.
the event that the board tonight sanctions it.
Good.
Okay, seeing no further conversation, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? And seeing no abstentions, it is passed. Go do your homework, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, guys.
Get me up, fellas. Well done. Well done. Well done. Play ball, baby. Don't leave me hanging. Well done. Thanks for coming, guys.
So our second item under presentations is the proposed budget summary. And Jeff, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's be so much more exciting.
Hang on a second, Jeff.
Sure. Yep. So much more exciting than football, right? Budget. But the budget does include some items that are changes from the original presentation on March 21st. So certainly going through that and updating any final numbers that we have. This is basically my, for members of the board that are new this year and for the public, this is my last hurrah on giving any information on the budget. From here on out, it becomes technically the board's budget. Between now and next week, to sift through the budget, decide if you as a board decide to adopt the budget next Monday evening. But at this point, this is my last step, and Scott and I obviously are supporting the budget all the way through to referendum, but it really becomes the board's budget next Monday evening with the vote to adopt it. So this is a summary only. This is not a re-presentation from the 21st, but a summary of where we're at and where some of the numbers might have changed since the 21st, just to keep everyone on the same page. Our revenue picture has not changed much from March 21st. It's pretty much the same. We are still expecting a state subsidy of $12.9 million for next year. And we are expecting about 276,000 more when you look at our total revenue picture, or about 2.16% of an increase. Looking at budget adjustments since March 21st, we've made a lot of minor adjustments to various accounts, but the major adjustments that have been made since March 21st is that we have received our insurance. Our employee insurance amounts came in. First, we were told that they would be no larger than an 8% increase across the board for the state. And then our specific district amount based on our low experience rate, which means that we've had very few employee health issues that would increase our health insurance. So we actually came in at 0%, which in our budget is $450,000 difference for the health insurance downward. However, we also, because of, I'm not going to say the word COVID, maybe I should spell it, but because of a lot of changes in employee health status and family health status over the last 2 years, we are insurance. So this is a forecasted amount of about $100,000 that we did not originally budget, but we do feel like we're going to need those funds in order to provide enough money in our accounts for staff members who are making changes to their health insurance. And this is the time that they begin to enroll in new health plans starting now. We also have a duplicate ed tech position in the budget. We actually love finding these. Scott is great at going over this budget over and over and over again and finding these sort of duplications. Any duplication we always catch up on by this point. We did find the ed tech that we had thought we had not duplicated was in fact duplicated in this budget and put an account line that we needed to get rid of. $24,000 also for psychological services. We actually are moving those funds next year to federal dollars, which is local entitlement. I'll be talking a little bit more about local entitlement in just a moment. But we found $24,000 that actually should have gone into our local entitlement fund outside the general fund. There's also an addition, and people have referenced it earlier tonight, of a half-time FTE theater teacher / play director / GCA scheduler. And I put all those in the descriptor line because it could be all-encompassing or one of those three or two of the three. We have not fleshed that out, but we do know that there is a strong need, and this did come at a very late point in the budget process, but there has been strong interest in pushing this forward and making sure that this occurs in order to support the arts. I will make just one comment about the arts over the last 2 years. The GCA opened in late 2018, and about a year later, COVID came around, and we could not have live performances for 2 years in this space. So really what we're dealing with were remote performances. And I think that obviously put a damper on many of our athletic programs were able to continue during that period of time, but because of the nature of theater, being in a closed space, 2/3 of our athletic programs were outdoors for 2 years. I think it obviously made a very difficult position for us to move forward with a lot of theater programming. Our plan is always to have a theater teacher in our school. We did have a certified theater teacher who also taught social studies and taught a theater course for students at the high school for many, many years. And we've not been able to replicate that because there are a few people in the state that are certified. However, we have an opportunity now to move forward, and I would strongly recommend that we put a half-time theater teacher into the budget, and with the hopes that we could possibly increase that FTE in a year. Based on how that's going. We also have finished the course, the course of studies at the high school has been finished for next year, and we want to see how this goes, considering when we finish that, we would have to have students sign up now for these new classes. So I think easing into this would be the best way to handle it. But to at least put this half-time position into the budget. And then the other adjustments since March 21st are staffing adjustments due to new hires. Our administrators have been hiring for the last few weeks since the budget was presented. And based on the new people that we're hiring, we have adjusted our thinking on some of the lines. We're hiring some experienced people, we usually do, but even more so than we anticipated, so we are making an adjustment. And we usually make these adjustments at this point in the budget process, just as we're about to hand it over to the board. So this is not unusual for us to start looking at the new hires, start making sure our employee staffing lines, which is 70% of our budget, look right. And if they're not, make those adjustments now before we turn it over to the board. That is actually pretty typical in our process for a $44 million budget with 415 staff members. So the net adjustment since I presented it on March 21st would be $306,500. That does not include some minor adjustments here and there in various accounts, just fine-tuning the budget. That's your major adjustments. And I did note, and it's been said, I think Jason mentioned it earlier, that expenses for football, which is around $20,000, have previously been held in the budget because that was an earlier conversation that we had with the board at the workshop several weeks ago. And in recognition also of the football boosters, as Jennifer mentioned, is a heavy lift of boosters to restart the program here, and it's about $30,000 that they are committing to. I'd like to thank the football boosters for their generous contribution to make this work. So I'm not going to go through every one of these lines. It's also small print. However, just to show you that adjustments have been made since March 21st in all of the 10 lines that we budget for. There's an 11th line that we do not budget for anymore, which is CTE. That's handled by the state, but we still have to carry it as a cost area in our budget. So on March 21st, the variance between the current budget and next year's budget was at just under 2.3 million. And as of today, the variance between the current budget and the proposed budget for 22-23 is just over 1.9 million. So we were able to bring that variance down. So the total budget, instead of being 44.1 million, which I proposed on March 21st, looking at 43.8 million, to be exact, $43,802,526.44 is the proposed budget tonight, which is down from 5.43 on expenditures being proposed on March 21st to now 4.67% on expenditures being proposed tonight. There's also some contingency warrant articles. I mentioned this on March 21st, but just to reiterate, these are separate warrant articles that we'll be bringing up at the district budget meeting on May 19th for approval, and then again at the referendum. But $450,000 for general contingency, which is about 1% of the total proposed budget, would be a warrant article for voters to approve. And then $250,000 for fuel stabilization. As we all know, the fuel costs, energy costs are very volatile right now. We are not sure exactly what we're facing, just like residential homeowners are not sure. School districts and organizations are also dealing with that same thing, and we want to have a go-to place in case we need it. Neither one of these warrant articles will raise taxes, and I want to make that really clear. This would be using or dipping into our fund balance, which does not require a tax increase. So if we have to use it, we'll go there. If we don't, we won't. And it's just part of our ability to be prudent with fiscal management. We had a $350,000 COVID contingency, not knowing what we're going into this year. And we have used those funds this year for staffing that we did not anticipate, a lot of those funds. So it's important to have these contingencies in the event that we need them. Again, we won't use it if we don't need it. And historically, I should say that for general contingency, not the COVID contingency I just meant, generally speaking, our general contingency, we have not utilized much in past years. It's for emergencies that are not budgeted for, unanticipated. Something happens that we would not have known about. It's obviously a rainy day fund. So for Cumberland, the tax effect will be dropping from March 21st. It was, I believe, a little bit over 3% on March 21st. It's now at 2.13% for the tax effect, or $44 on the bill. 44 cents on milk, sorry. And for, a homeowner of about $400,000 home, which is the average home now in Cumberland, North Yarmouth, would be $176 for the year in Cumberland. The town of North Yarmouth, tax effect came down quite a bit. I think it was 7% on March 21st. It's now down to 3.94%, or 67 cents on the mill. And for the owner of a $400,000 home, $268 tax increase for the year for the schools. I want to thank both Cumberland and North Yarmouth for working with us and looking at new value and growth in the towns and being able to share that growth, which they have done year in and year out for the SAD, and looking proportionally at the tax increase, town versus school. So I want to thank both towns for their work on that. I also, usually at this time in the budget season, as I'm passing it off to the board, I give you information on things that, or funds that fall outside of the general fund of the budget. I think it's important to get a total scope and picture of all of the funds that we receive. We receive a lot of money in federal funds. All of our Elementary and Secondary Education Act money, which is all federal money for reading and mathematics. Title 1A, Title 2A. We do not receive Title 3 in this district, which is ELL. Only 4 or 5 districts in the state of Maine now receive those funds. But we also receive Title 4. Title 1A is reading and math support. Title 2A is professional development. Title 4 is for drug-free and safe schools. You are allowed to, in a district, especially a district like ours that receives very little money, and federal ESEA money, to wrap those monies together into one and use it in one area. And we wrap, if we get a small amount, we wrap it all together into one amount, and we use it for Title 1A to support literacy at Maple Light Wilson School, to support a couple of salaries there. So in the current year, we have $110,556 that we received. For next year, we're anticipating that we'll receive about $3,000 more the next year. For local entitlement, that's also federal money. This is special education money that we receive outside of the general budget. Comes from the federal government. And we received this current year $9,212 for pre-K, and for ages 6 to 20, which we educate students ages 6 through 20 in special education, $445,673. We have not received any indications as of yet what our local entitlement money will be for next year. Sometimes we receive that figure, and we haven't received anything yet. 2 areas of federal monies that will be going away after this year because we've expended it, not because the deadline has come and gone. We've used all of our money for ESSER on staffing over the last 2 years, as well as other projects when those deadlines had expired. We had to use them by a certain date. These monies would actually be carrying through for another year, but because we elected to use the money for staffing, we have used it up. So we do not have any more ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 funds that will be going into the next year. And those monies were used to pay for several of the one-year teaching positions that the board chose last year to recommend to the voters, and also some nursing staff as well. But those will not be available in the coming school year. Revolving renovation, as you know, we've been approved for $1.5 million from the state and making some repairs at Maple Light Wilson School for doors, windows, and HVAC. Half of that amount will be given to the SAD free of charge. Basically, you have the money, and the other half will be 0% interest. So that those are monies that we'll be receiving, and that's due for next year. And finally, gifted and talented. This current year, we've received about $280,000 for staff for gifted and talented programming.
and we have yet to receive any indication for our gift and intelligence numbers for next year. Sometimes we, again, get those numbers early. Food service also falls outside the general fund. It's basically supposed to be a self-sufficient fund. There have been years, obviously, when we've asked the board to bail out the food service program and to make it whole again. 2020-21 was one of those years. Certainly COVID had a huge impact over the last couple of years on our food service program. Last year, at the end of the year, if you recall, there was $202,866 that we were in deficit for the food service program, and we're projecting at this point, these are estimates, that will be in the clear $64,408 for the food service program this year, and that's after starting with a deficit of $34,565. So making up that deficit and then some for the food service program. Feeding more kids than ever this year. Lots and lots of students participating in the food lunch program that we have, and many thanks to the state legislature for continuing the free meal program going into the next year. I shared with you this, and we've updated it a little bit. This is just the history of the SAD expenditure and taxes going back to 2015, just to give you an idea that we are basically on the same wavelength as we have been for many years in terms of the tax effect and the expenditure increases that we put forward annually. Some years have been a little bit less and some a little bit more, depending on the year and what's going on. But just to give you an idea that where we're at, pretty much in the same hunt. And then to compare regionally, these are all the districts in the Cumberland County area, just showing the current expenditure increases for each of these districts and the tax effect. Again, none of these have been solidified, but this is where all of our districts are at right now, including ours. It just gives you an idea that we're actually one of the lowest expenditure increases and one of the lowest tax effect increases that we're proposing in Cumberland County, which has been the case for the last, I have to say, the last 5 years. Cohort comparison, just looking, we often compare ourselves to Yarmouth, Falmouth, Cape Elizabeth. I've done this year in and year out with these 3 other districts. Two figures. I think I was asked last time if I could compare our raw per pupil cost as well as our adjusted per pupil. The differences with the raw per pupil cost, taking the gross budget that's being proposed by each district, divided by the number of students in the district, and for the purposes of student numbers, we use the current student numbers in each of the 4 districts, and that gives you a raw per pupil cost. So it shows that we are just over Yarmouth in terms of our raw per pupil cost, but we are under Falmouth and Cape Elizabeth in our per pupil costs, our raw per pupil cost. When you look further and then take into consideration the revenue that we receive, most of it is from the state of Maine, and then we get miscellaneous revenue. And you look at the tax assessment and compare our adjusted per pupil cost. We are the lowest of the 4 that we generally compare ourselves to. $14,606 per student, and that goes all the way up to $19,104 per student for Cape Elizabeth for adjusted per pupil. And again, adjusted just means we're taking into account revenue that comes into the district. We are a higher receiving district for state subsidy and state revenue, so that accounts for that shift. And that just gives you more of a visual of our cohort per pupil comparison, again showing with the other 3 comparable districts that we are the lowest on the adjusted per pupil cost. Also on the ballot this year, voters will be asked to approve
the Mabel I. Wilson revolving renovation state funding, as I mentioned earlier. Again, this is for windows, doors, HVAC. These are needed repairs at that building no matter what happens with the school project going forward. That building, that facility, we need to take care of it. And we need to, this is something that's been on the docket for years and years to make these improvements to that facility. So again, the Department of Ed is providing $1.5 million after we have applied for it. And half of it is forgiven, just over half of it, almost 51%, which is about $770,000. And then the other 49.4% will be at 0% interest, so we won't be paying interest on that half. So voters do need to approve this. It will be a separate question on the June referendum to approve receipt of these funds in expense of the half that has to be paid back at 0% interest. And finally, also on the ballot this year, every 3 years, voters in the state of Maine are asked to vote in their district whether or not the school district should continue with the budget validation vote. Prior to the budget validation vote, which I think has been in place for about, I want to say about 10 years now, the SAD could complete the budget process at the district budget meeting, which is on May 19th this year. But there is a two-step vote in Maine, unless the voters of a school district decide they don't want to do that anymore and just stick with the district budget meeting. So that's up to voters to make that decision. And so there'll be another question on the ballot to go ahead and approve that. So the next steps for the budget process, obviously the public hearing is tonight. The board adoption of the budget vote is next Monday evening in the same room. District budget meeting, which we've not had in person for 2 years now, we bring back on Thursday, May 19th at 7 o'clock, just a little bit later. So if you show up at 6:30, we won't be here quite yet. 7 o'clock, also in this room. And then on Tuesday, June 14th, is the referendum vote or to vote by absentee ballot. So those are the next steps. And that's the budget summary tonight.
Thank you, Jeff. So I know that the board has questions, and you're going to get your chance, but I think that what we will do is open the public hearing. And here's how this is going to work. Pretty simply, you can head up to the podium, if you would be so kind to give us your name and your town. You can ask your questions. What I'll try to do is triage those questions, mostly to Scott and Jeff. If you happen to come up with the one question that we cannot answer in real time, we will commit to getting that information to you as quickly as possible. If you do not feel like going up to the microphone tonight, feel free to send an email to any of us on the board for a clarification that we can get for you expediently. That being said, am I forgetting any other ground rules? No? Beautiful. The public meeting is open. The public hearing, rather, is open.
Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Peter Siegel. I live in Cumberland. First of all, thank you to everybody up here for your service and for supporting the district. One thing I noticed while looking through the budget is continued large double-digit increase in health insurance. I guess my first question is, does it go up so much every year? Looks like it's 30% plus this year. And secondly, what is the board of the district doing and looking at to curb those expenses moving forward?
Peter, if I may, your question was about the healthcare.
Health care, yeah, health insurance. It's being offered to the employees of the district.
Sure. Well, I'll jump in and then hand it off to wiser folks than myself. Chairing finance, when they put a placeholder in for an 8% increase, I thought that was going to be low. And then when they came to us last week and said that actually the factor is 0 for next year, which I do think was staggering, given that most people's health insurance went up over the past 24 months and every year that people can get an increase. To have a flat renewal mod is spectacular. Scott, you've spent more time looking at that number. Would you like to add context to that?
Sure. Maybe some of the double-digit increases.
Pull that mic in if you would.
Yeah, maybe somebody. Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Some of the increases you're seeing are probably related to staff moves between cost centers, so like educational technicians. There may be a number of staff that have moved to a different area, so you're seeing a larger health increase because the health increase follows the staff to that cost.
Sure.
The other areas are areas where we've had some new staff that have been added to the district, so we have to also account for the health insurance for new staff. As was mentioned, this year health insurance did come in at 0% for our overall increase. However, we have had staff picking up health insurance who haven't taken it before as well, which has been another avenue that we've had to take a look at. What have we done to control costs? Certainly through the collective bargaining process, we've controlled costs with our association who has worked with us around controlling health costs. It is an association plan or a union plan that we have for health insurance, and it's collectively bargained. What we've done is controlled costs through our contribution to health insurance. And then also a number of years ago, myself, several other of the Southern Maine districts got together and we met with Anthem to talk about using an experience rating for Southern Maine for controlling our costs, because as part of that whole health pool, we were picking up areas north of us, east of us, and we were part of a larger pool. So by using the experience factor, where in this particular area experience factors are lower, we were able to control our costs by moving that forward. So that's what we've done.
No, that's great. Like I'm looking at, for example, if you look at, on the budget here on the line item, transportation group health up, 8.76%. Sure. I think nurses is up substantially as well, like 31%. So that's what I was referring to. But if that doesn't reflect the true cost of the overall district, then, I would agree with you. I think 0% is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and I can respond to those two specifically. We have added some drivers to the district, and also we had a nursing position, which we had added this year, and so the health insurance follows that position as well. That position was picked up by federal funds in the year we're in.
Okay. Yeah, I think there are a couple others in here as well. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but I think there was one, another one under the central office. I think there's some growth there, so on and so forth. So are those just new hires and expanding the pool?
Yes, what you're finding in the central office was that we've added an HR position in the central office, a human resource position.
Yep.
So that position would have to carry with it health benefits as well. So I think what you're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, you're seeing new positions that have been added to the district's budget, which also we have to budget for those health insurance numbers. And certainly it's a numerator-denominator factor that if you add, a two-person health plan, and it's, $18,000, let's say, well, then that cost certainly would drive up that cost center.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's it going? Tim Valenti, North Yarmouth. Thanks for the time. I reviewed the budget and sat with you guys a couple weeks ago, I guess, for a couple hours. It was a long meeting. I was very impressed with our stamina. And I've reviewed it. I've reviewed your summary. I've gone over line by line. And I still can't figure out how it aligns to our strategic plan. I know you have that sheet that has a little checkbox on it. And I think just the rolled up nature of what we've been given doesn't give us insights in how it addresses our needs, at least for me, and I imagine for other families. So it's hard for me to support it or to be like, this isn't right for me. So if you could tell us how it highlights our priorities, fills gaps that parents have shown concerns around, like SPED support, academic interventionalists, addressing potential bullying. So what elements of this budget address what you think are our biggest needs, and what are you really excited about in terms of giving us confidence that this is a budget that will improve us this year and for years to come?
Thank you, Tim. I know you're looking for a slide for the strategic plan. Nobody's watching. We're good.
Okay.
Tim, were there any particular lines in that you want us to give the connection to?
Yeah, we can go to, I guess, some of the PD that I saw seemed relatively low for other school budgets that I've been a part of. I've seen a lot of school budgets in my time. I think that was a relatively low one that I'd like just to know what that is addressing. But yeah, that specifically.
Okay. Thank you. Almost there.
Yeah, so our strategic plan, we did have a goal a few years ago around supporting our staff, and we put a lot of emphasis on professional development and professional learning during that strategic plan phase. And this particular strategic plan that we've been under for, I think, since 2018, before COVID, that was not one of our 4 goals. Doesn't mean that we don't invest in professional development and learning. But certainly over the last 2 years, we've made it a goal for our teachers and our staff to be in the classroom. Considering last year we were in a hybrid model, we needed our students to get every inch of instruction they could during the days they were in school. And then this year, obviously, having our teachers and our staff in the classrooms as much as possible. In terms of professional development, we do a lot of in-house professional development. That has been our goal, so Wednesday afternoons. Unlike other school districts that do not have maybe the breadth of professional learning time that we offer here for our staff, that is when we provide the bulk of our professional learning. Believe that professional learning, not that conferences aren't useful outside the district, but a lot of our professional learning is in-house so that we're all moving in the same direction. So that may be one of the reasons you're seeing that disparity. Some of our professional learning also is targeted at certain programs. For example, International Baccalaureate, we send teachers to get trained. They have to be trained to teach. Whether it's a reading model, we've done a lot of work in literacy at the primary level, and we have invested a lot of time and money into making sure our teachers are trained for that. But again, a lot of it is in-house, so you will not see that reflected necessarily in our budget. But it doesn't mean that it's not a strategic priority for us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Just adding, you can go back, Tim, but in each year, the building administrators have done a compelling job of talking about where they're going to be focusing professional learning, and a few of us did approach the superintendent to do a very strong preview of that in September when they start talking about the way that they're going to move through the year. So I think that should become more clear as well, if that's helpful.
Yeah, and in the original presentation, and I appreciate Tim bringing this up because there's a lot of check marks. So these are things that are basically just changes from budget year to budget year. It doesn't reflect the totality of the strategic alignment. Some of the strategic plan has been curtailed by, I recommended it over the last 2 years that we scale back the strategic plan while we were in the pandemic in order to really focus our efforts on the classroom as much as possible. And these priorities that were initially presented, anything with a red check mark, these are new areas that do align to the current strategic plan that we have in strategic priorities. So you'll see a lot of it, for example, at Mabel I. Wilson School next year is enrollment related. One of our 4 quadrants of the strategic plan is elementary education and supporting that through a building project, through enrollment, making sure that we have enough staff for the enrollment surge that we've seen at the primary school level and now at the 4th and 5th grade level. So those are the kinds of things that we continue to support in our strategic planning. And then the final thing I'll just mention is that each school, as Kevin mentioned, has their own mini strategic plan for their school or department. So each department and school in our district has that. And each principal, assistant principal, and their leadership team in their school or department also comes up with a year-to-year strategic plan. We call them school improvement plans, strategic improvement plans, and those are also presented at the beginning of each school year by each administrator. So those are things that where we continuously tie the strategic plan into the budget in what we're trying to do. I think one of the things that, and I guess this will be the last thing I say, at some point we need to start a renewal of the strategic plan. With the pandemic, a lot of that was placed on hold, and we have been discussing the ideas of renewing that and bringing that to the board for discussion. And I think we plan to do that in the next couple of months. The discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank all of you and thank you for putting the halftime theater position in the budget, and also recognize that and agree with those of you who spoke that there should never be a choice or a pitting against of sports versus the arts. I think that is critical to recognize in our district. I would also ask that we reevaluate that halftime position to a full-time position. And my reasoning for that is that I think, given, Jeff, what you have lined out as some of the responsibilities of that position, and having worked for the last 15 years as a theater professional, there's a lot of hours there. And if you are asking somebody to do all three of those things, and I know you said it's up for grabs and it may not be all of those, they're not going to be able to succeed and do all three of those things well in a halftime position. And I think you're setting a person up for failure. And I would like to see, as Peter so beautifully said, see us really bring this place to life again and fulfill it with people in our district and people who know what they're doing and people who can allow the students to take some ownership of the GSA again. So I think allowing that to start this year and hit the ground running then for next year with the full-time position as a teaching position would be beneficial to our district. So I don't know if that, my question would be as, I guess, why we can't create a full-time position and why we are trying to squeeze so much into a part-time position.
Yeah, I think I actually might ask Mr. Gray, if you don't mind, talking about the course of studies and how it aligns. And I think that's one of the reasons we've talked about a halftime position, because the course of studies has already come out, students have already been signing up for classes. And we obviously want to grow something if we're going to start it and make sure it's successful. But I don't know, Don, if you don't mind talking about just the status of the course of studies and why that's important.
Yeah, so I would just say the course of studies, we have a schedule for creating our schedule and for course signups, and that process began back in early December and really took off in mid-January. And so that course of studies was completed, if my memory serves me correct, probably at the end of January so that we could begin to prepare for students to sign up for courses. So although, adding a full-time theater position would be awesome, I would have concern at this point. We've already had sophomores, juniors, and seniors sign up for courses. Freshmen are due to sign up, I believe, next week. They've already started that process. So to add a full-time position at this point, I think it would be tough to fill. It might be tough to fill all those course offerings. And I think that's why we were considering a halftime, so that we could build that program. And I believe that the goal is to have a full-time position in the very near future, but to start off with a halftime. And again, I think it's because it's so late in that course sign-up time frame and the course of studies is completed, that it might be difficult to fill fully fill 5 courses at this point.
Yeah, I will jump in also and say in the past, we've started new programs or put new positions in. That's the tack that we've taken in the district. For example, pathways, we had no pathways at all. We had no alternative ed. Several years ago, we started with 1 position and then we grew it into a 2nd position. As a year later after we saw the success, and we started to grow that. Same thing with STEM programming. We started small and then we've added those course offerings and those staff members. So I think it's going to be the same situation. I just wanted people to understand where we're at in the process of having students sign up. Most freshmen take core courses and not electives as a freshman, so there wouldn't be a lot of freshmen that would be even eligible, I think, to sign up for a lot of electives like that.
Correct. And I'll just finish by saying, I know our guidance department stands ready, so if this is voted and approved, I know we can go back and certainly fill some courses. Again, I just would be concerned that our ability to fill 5 courses at this point.
Kevin, can I ask something?
Please.
So with this, Jeff, if we hire a half-time person and then next year we're looking for a full-time person, would that person next year be a completely different type of person that we're hiring? So, and I'm not sure if I'm articulating it correctly, but if we go into this and hire a half-time person and then next year we want to add those courses or develop this, are we pigeonholing ourselves with 1 person and then we would have to essentially hire 2 half-time people, or get rid of that person and start anew?
Not necessarily. I mean, it really, it's very hard for me to answer without knowing who would be in the position to begin with. But I have to say this is a normal process for us. Every single year we have lots of positions in our district. If we are for need based on student movement, we'll ask somebody if they're half-time or part-time, would you like to go full-time in the position because we need more time. So we do that constantly.
So they would have to have a teaching certificate to be in this position?
Even a half-time position,
Even
yes.
the half-time?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have to be certified.
I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, the state requires us to have a certified person teaching any program.
So we feel confident that this is the way, this could work in our favor, doing it this way?
I believe it will, based on what Dawn and I have had several conversations about this, and I do believe this is the best way to go. I think it was Holly that mentioned, this may be too much for a half-time person. I agree, and I put those 3 things up there just to say these are some of the, these are the 3 things that we might be looking at. We may say, look, we've got enough kids to fill courses, and that's the only thing we want them doing, and that's it. It really depends, I think, somewhat on student interest, courses that where students are signing up, and that will kind of drive the other 2.
Is there enough, if you had more questions, sorry, Jennifer.
Go ahead.
Right. Is there enough interest to go beyond 1 full-time, 1 FTE? Like you mentioned, you gave a couple of examples of going a 1 to a 2. To me, just functionally, that seems like it's a more seamless way to grow. You have a full-time position, it's probably easier to hire into, and then you would grow to 2 positions. Is that a possibility here, or is this more where you're seeing this as only a 1 FTE?
I think it's different. For example, think back in like the Pathways program, that was we needed someone full-time to teach that because you can't, Alt-Ed or Pathways is really a full-time program. The difference here with theater is that you can have a class each semester or 2 classes each semester really is what we're hiring for. Or even, I believe is it 2 or 3, Dawn? It's 2, right?
Say again, what's the question, Jeff?
How many courses per semester? Up to, it's 2 courses, I believe.
For halftime?
For halftime.
It would be two and then 3 for .5, right? It would be 2 courses, and 2 semester courses, and then 3 semester courses, or two full year courses, and maybe one of those semesters, either first or second semester teacher semester course.
Because they're electives and because they're either half-time or full year, we can play with that a little bit. It's different from like an alt-ed program where you need a teacher in that, in that classroom all day long.
Would we be worried that if this was a full-time, that this person would not have enough to do if there weren't enough classes? Because given the other play director GCA schedule.
I think not that they wouldn't have enough to do. I think we want to make sure that we grow this effectively. We do not want a program where we have 2 classes that are under enrolled, and it's late in the season. And again, the course approval process has already gone through. Honestly, we really should have had this discussion back in January and brought it at that place. We had a lot of other competing priorities. If people remember, that we did not put on the table either. So this is a late request. So I'm cautioning the board to be, cautious in going forward with this.
Go ahead, Jason.
Would we advertise, or could we advertise it in such a way that it's worded that, potentially next year it could become a full-time position, so we attract that sort of person that
We usually, when we talk with candidates, sometimes those conversations just come up informally, and somebody will show their interest. They really want a full-time position. No, they love being half-time, and they do not want to work full-time. We usually get that indication from interviews. The other piece is that if there is another part-time position, we often will consider 2 part-time positions together if somebody's got the certification as a possibility. We've done that on a number of occasions where somebody has actually been able to do 2 things, and we put those together and found the right applicant for the position. So it could be any number of things. It really depends on the person.
All right. And the other areas besides the coursework that we're thinking of putting on this person are what?
So the 3 possibilities would be, as Don mentioned, 2 courses one semester, 3 the next, 2 full-year, full-length courses.
Yep.
So kind of looking at what student need is, possibly directing the plays as part of the assignment, depending on the student interest in the courses, and possibly scheduling this space. This is a space that gets scheduled elsewhere, but if somebody is in here a lot of the time, it might make sense for them to be handling the scheduling. They'll be in here in this space, and it might be easier to start growing some outside activities. We also need to get the Gca Advisory Group going again. That group took a hiatus, but that's a group that has done a lot of work in the past getting external groups to use it after hours. I wouldn't expect this position to be doing that. That's up to a group to be working on.
Yeah. Would it be possible, well, is all of this that we're discussing between school hours at this point for this position?
Mostly school hours, although we've adjusted school hours depending on, again, if it was, let's just say that the need was we only have a course that the person's teaching one of the semesters so they can take up the plays, we would adjust their hours to make that work.
Could it potentially be a stipend for the plays on top of it so that, for that after-school work?
Yes, that's still in the budget.
Yeah.
We've not pulled that from the budget.
Yeah. I'm in favor of all that. I question whether that person that's doing that role would be the right person to try to fill this place all the time and bring in extra revenue. I'm in favor of doing that, but I kind of
I agree. I think that is anything beyond the play directing, the course, I think the scheduling is more some light scheduling for the most part. That would be in here. I think it's got to be the GCA group, advisory group that's really taking on. Are there external programs, groups that we want to start bringing back in here? Which we know we want to do that. That's part of our plan.
Okay.
So I think I'm confused. So the halftime position would still need to schedule classroom hours, right?
So I'm saying that's a possibility.
Okay.
So that's one of those 3 areas that the person, depending on the student need in the courses or the student interest, is that person going to have time to do the play directing? Is that person going to have time to do scheduling? If there's a lot of student interest
those two other things may not happen at all. That person may not be the person.
So what's on the table is going to essentially muck up the system, even the halftime person, right?
Depending on how many classes they're actually teaching. So if they're teaching, let's just say they're teaching 3 classes in a semester, they're not going to have time to do much else.
Right, but what I was thinking when we were talking about a halftime position is that they wouldn't be teaching classes. And the change was from halftime to full-time is where it would come into play with the scheduling issue. But we're saying, right, the way the budget stands right now, we have to stop what guidance is doing and open up the book again and add these courses, right?
That's the idea, that somebody's actually teaching theater courses in our high school.
So essentially, there's an issue with signing up for classes as we stand right now, not from half-time to full-time.
I think that's certainly one of the reasons I'm not recommending full-time, because we have been through the course sign-up process. We're so deep into that, that it'll be very difficult to fill all those courses right now.
So you're saying it's okay, I'm sorry if I'm just not getting it.
Yeah.
So you're saying with the halftime, we still have courses to fill?
I think we would still be able to. I'm going to have to ask Dawn. You have more insight on the guidance process.
Which is fine, but just so I understand, we will have courses offered by filling this position halftime that people will come in and move their schedules around.
So if the board tonight approves,
Right.
or I should say Monday evening, but if you're okay tonight with this halftime position, staying in the budget, then what we would do is we would start the process of opening those, whatever it is, 2 courses up and putting together a description and getting student interest.
Okay. So from going from halftime to full-time, is there a way to look at whether the Theater Boosters wants to supplement the other portion? I know that, I'm not trying to piggyback off of what football is doing, but if there's, can we get creative where it's not going to affect the taxpayers, but we get the right person? And I know we're in the final hours of this to kind of think about that.
Yeah, I think that would be a huge lift. And for a regular teaching position, I think it would be very unprecedented for us to use booster dollars.
I guess I mean not for the teaching part, for the other part.
For the other, well, we have the stipends in there
So
for the
then that's not a
play
concern.
directing. Yeah,
So
that's
it's
still
just
in
the
the budget.
classroom. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's just moving it from offering, just to kind of, it moves it from offering 2 courses to possibly 5 courses.
If it goes to full-time.
If it went to full-time next year.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just say.
I wasn't clear that it's really it's really a teaching position.
Yes.
All the way through. I think the other things that were listed out kind of mucked it up a little bit for me.
Yeah, so I probably should have been more clear about the play directing. So we have the stipends for the play, the fall and the spring play directing still in the budget. It might be that this person is the person doing it,
Right,
or it
and
might
they
be
receive
somebody
that.
else
Right.
is doing it. It may not be
Okay.
we may be talking about 2 different people still.
Yep, okay.
Or we might be, well, it makes sense. I think the idea behind the interest in this is not only to offer these courses, and I'm kind of speaking off right now, as this is a late hour request, but I think part of it is when we had a teacher here for years and years who taught a theater course, performing arts theater course, that person got to knew the students from teaching here and was able to get a lot of students involved in the theater program.
And really draw them to the
And that's kind of the point, is to get kids enrolled in these courses, get them interested in not just the play, but in theater in general, and see that as an integral part of the school program. And I think, that's been our goal for ever since we built this place, and probably before then, part of the strategic plan. So anything we can do to start moving in that direction makes sense. I don't know if that
No, it helps a lot. I'm
that
sorry
helps.
if I did.
But it is primarily a teaching position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to return to the public hearing piece, and we will be able to ask
Okay,
additional
sorry.
questions.
I just
Holly.
wanted to clarify one more thing, and
Please.
this sort of goes to, it's muddled in my mind too, Jennifer, so right now all we have is stipend theater positions. We do not have a theater teaching position. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
Okay.
for years, we haven't had anybody who's
Okay.
taught theater, right?
So we are looking at going to a half-time theater position and maintaining the stipends that would potentially cover the musical and a play each year.
Correct.
Would this person in their teaching position then also take on the State One Act and allow us to offer a team in the State One Act competition?
So that's the stuff that we haven't sorted out, so we don't know. And that's why I kind of put those three things
No, I'm
up
just
there.
trying to figure out
Yeah.
sort of what this encompasses and what opportunities are going to be available to students going forward and how it fits in. So that's all I was asking. Just to
Yep, I think
clarify.
those are all possibilities that would be on the table, but I do want to make it clear that the play directing stipends are in the budget.
Right.
We didn't remove them because it's either, we're continuing with the model we have, or this person is the person because they're working with students during the school day. So it makes sense to also do that. We just don't know enough, and that's why we're putting it in the
Awesome.
budget and placeholding everything.
Okay, thank you, and I won't take up any more time. I know it's getting late, so thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
I promise I'll be quick. You had said, I think, Peter, that this theater wasn't utilized over the last few years because of COVID, and it was unique to theater that we couldn't do programs here. So it feels like insult to injury that we're further sacrificing the theater program. Some kids will now go their entire high school career without experiencing a true theater program. And I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I didn't say that Dr. Patterson, who's in my 30 years of being a theater professional, the most qualified person to have this job, is willing to do it and was offered a full-time position, or an intended full-time position in 2019. And she's been holding on to this theater department even during COVID, and created a magical, life-changing production of Rent. And we're going to lose her if it's part-time, and I think that would be a huge loss to our community.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Larry Lonigan. I'm from North Yarmouth. I've looked at the summary, shall we say, relative to revenues and expenditures. And relative to expenditures, I haven't looked at it in detail, but I've looked at it in the aggregate, and it looks reasonable and prudent that it's only an increase of 4.67%. Guess you guys should be complimented on that. Relative to the revenues, I do have questions, and it's somewhat predicated or impacted by the fact is that I don't have estimated actual numbers as of, let's say, March 31st, 2022 for the current fiscal year. So all I have is the ability to look at the past relative to the financial position of the organization. When I look at the financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021, I see that one is a, actually let me come back a moment, is that I wanted to mention that in July of 2021, after the budget was approved, the state revised the funding for the school district with an additional 1.2 million. Where that number is and where that money is, I'm not sure, other than it has to be showing up in current operations.
So I'll try to answer some of that because it is a little confusing. You're right. After the legislature passed the budget, there was a supplemental budget that was passed in order to bring state funding up to 55% across the state, and each school district received money in order to support education from the state depending on the receivership percentage. So we received close to 1.2 million. And at that time, because it was after the budget process was over, it was put into into fund balance where it is. So subsequently, when we received our state subsidy in the current year for next year, looking at it, we actually lost a sizable amount of state subsidy going into next year. We were able to show that the loss was actually about a $276,000 or $283,000 in the black because we were able to offset with the 1.2 million, and that's showing that our state subsidy revenue actually was on the good side and not on the negative side. The actual preliminary figures show that we were losing several $100,000 for next year. So we were able to counteract that and show a positive revenue projection for next year. So I appreciate you pointing that out, and that was helpful to us and able to put those revenues together. Mr. Poulin, you're usually better at articulating revenue than I am. You want to clear anything up?
The only thing I would add is that, there's been some prudent financial planning around looking at the school building project that's coming up. And so what that 1.2 million that you're referring to is actually going to be added to undesignated fund balance in the year we're in. And then we're looking to use those funds to offset and soften the impact of the debt service of that school project to the community. So for instance, right now we have 3.8 million in fund balance, and we'd be adding 1.2 million to that, basically affording the ability to offset interest and principal on that project over a period of years until we retire more debt, and then we get to a point where we've actually neutralized the largest part of the increase to the taxpayers.
I'll make an observation before I continue on my other points. One is you say that you put money into the fund. And the question, I've done a little research, but I haven't done complete research on state statutes. And the state statute indicates that if one puts money into reserve, at least my impression, my reading, is that a reserve amount would have to be voted on and approved by the school district, the communities, on warrant vote.
Yeah. What I'm talking about is not a reserve account, and that would be the items that Jeff had mentioned earlier in the district budget, the contingency, and then the other pieces. What I'm talking about is applying fund balance as a carry forward from one year to the next. The state affords you the ability to build that fund balance and then have a plan to utilize it over a 3-year period.
Right.
So that's a little bit different statute than what you're referring to.
Actually, that's another statute, and that one's utilized that money over 1 to 3 years.
Correct.
Not necessarily just 3 years.
Yeah, and so that's what we're doing is we're strategically planning to use that. The board, the finance committee is strategically planning to use that in anticipation of taking on that debt service of a new building project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Although the building project has yet to be approved, shall we say.
That's correct.
So at this
Right,
point...
that would have to be approved by voters.
That's correct.
Yes.
Second item is that when I look at the 6/30/21 financials, I see that there's a cash position of close to $10 million. Obviously, there's a liability, but it's a fairly significant cash position. Additionally, the fund balance for that year was, total fund balances was $6.4 million. And additionally, in that year, for 6/30/21, revenues exceeded expenditures by $1.6 million. So there's some big numbers floating around there. And the question is, I know that you're trying to plan for the future, but there's also current realization, the current world. The current world, for example, the latest indication is that there's been inflation of 8.54% for the last fiscal year, current year, which, it's, when I look at your expenditures, 4.5, it's 4.6, not bad. But additionally, think about the people whose costs are going up by 8.5%. Can everybody in the communities afford that? How do they shoulder that increase? So my point is that it seems to me you have a very strong financial position, and maybe you can moderate what you're asking from the communities because of what's going on in today's world.
I could offer
That's
something
my point
to that if
for
you'd like.
today.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably what you're talking about on the cash position too is that there's on behalf payments that have to be made to Maine State Retirement. There's also summer salaries that are accrued for staff. So at June 30th, you may see a larger cash position, but there's also obligations that are due over the course of the summer for health and salaries, et cetera.
Right, but you also have cash flow coming in from the community, so
but it's,
that must be coming in, what, once a month?
yes, it is, but it's obligated, you know, for the fiscal year, and so you have to take whatever would be encumbered over July and August and charge that back against the previous year.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what you're saying as well, to apply. I'm not going to debate it with you. I'm just going to tell you what it is, okay?
Right, yeah.
So what you have to do is you also have to consider the fact that every time you take fund balance and you apply it to the fiscal year in order to buy down taxes, if you don't have that same amount year after year after year after year, then eventually you've built a hole that you've got to dig yourself out of 5 years from now. And that's when you would see a large tax increase to build yourself out of that hole.
And I think that's why over the years you're seeing that our district, we also put forward pretty low tax increases compared to our neighboring districts. We've been able to do 0% over the last 5 years for tax, effect, and well under, 2, 3, 4% in many years, which is unlike our neighboring districts. And we try to keep those tax effect and our expenditures lower. And I think it's because we have a strong financial position that we're able to do that.
Well, my question is whether the strong financial position could be utilized to some extent.
Yeah. It'll also help out significantly when we go to bond the school project. If we have a strong fund balance, undesignated balance, we'll get a stronger rating with Moody's and Standards & Poor's, which will save the community hundreds and thousands in interest. So that'll also help.
Not much I can say to that.
Okay.
Other than I might say that, one of the items I think about when you use that argument is that what you're asking people to do today is to prepay a cost for the future. And effectively, not everybody is going to be will be in the community at that time. There'll be people today that are paying these taxes who will be moving or passing away or what have you. And you're asking them to pay for something that is in the future. Effectively, you're asking for people to make an investment that they might never realize. So, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? Okay. It would appear that there's no one else queued, so I will effectively close the public hearing. And now turning back to my colleagues who may still have questions left. There's going to be two things that I would ask of the elected members of this board. So any of the questions that you have that you can gain additional insight, and then if you could indicate if you are comfortable and ready to proceed, because we will need to prepare warrants for next week's meeting where you will sign those. So those two things, any questions that are top of mind for you, and if you are comfortable moving forward to generation of those warrants. And actually, I will begin down with Michael, if that is okay.
It's okay. So my one question was already answered in the lengthy back and forth around the theater director. I do think we should have a full-time theater director. I'm not going to fall on the sword on the budget for it, but I think we should. It seems like we can afford it. I think we should. That said, the other thing I was going to note also is the question around our strategic priorities and how the budget matches them. That was an interesting question, and one we should consider going forward, just as we're looking at budgets and such, and looking at our strategic plan going forward. Not a critique this time around. Again, we paused that in COVID, and so as we move forward and bring that back, I think we should, as we look at budgets, really match the two. The one I'm going to mention is around pre-K. We've lifted up early education as strategic priority, and if our budget is to meet that strategic priority, we should be moving to a full-time pre-K position. With those points said, I don't have questions. Just had to pontificate for a moment. Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the budget. Again, if we can, I think we should attempt a full-time data director, but otherwise.
Thanks very much. Tom?
So I have a comment and then a question. The comment is actually also about the strategic priorities. I thought that was a great question. I love it when I get the question, what are you excited about? So I'm sorry that Tim's not here anymore because I did want to respond to that. So one of the things that I am excited about is adding administrative capacity at the high school. I don't think that's come up at all tonight, though it did come up at our last meeting. I feel like that could have a profound impact on the student experience at Greeley High School. And I think it aligns really well with our strategic priorities. So that is one thing that I'm excited about. I'm also excited about the health insurance lack of increase, but that doesn't have anything to do with our strategic priorities. Well, yeah. My one question, since we got like weirdly hung up on it at our last meeting, was, and I don't know if there's an answer to this yet, we were wondering about software costs and whether there's any way to curtail them in the proposed budget. And feel free to punt on that if you don't have an answer at this point.
Yeah, I think that would be a punt right now, only because we'd have to go back to the schools and talk about what that looks like. But I've got to tell you, most of the software that's in there and so forth are being utilized. And a lot of stuff now, while, there's so many subscriptions online. And, we went through every single one of those pieces of software, taking a look at them that were proposed. So I think it's just the time and the age, right?
Well, yeah, I would just second what Scott just said. Our administrators do annually ask teachers, are you using that software program? They'll put out a survey and find out how many teachers are actually using it and how is it aligned to the curriculum. And we had an example probably 5 years ago where we had a software program drop because teachers were not utilizing it. And then probably 2-3 years later, they went forward, asked either Foundation 51 or PTO to try it again, put a trial because we didn't have it in the budget. We had removed it. And so many teachers decided that they wanted to go back to using the software program that the board approved putting it back in the budget last year. So we do go back and forth. Our administrators do their due diligence in finding out, are teachers using it? There's a lot more software programs being used after the pandemic, I have to say, that were tried during the pandemic that teachers want to keep using.
I just want to jump on that. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but they may be utilized, but should they be utilized? Maybe we can.
We have a process. We have a process for that. We do vet those things through. Our district technology team does, along with the administrators. So it's not just like a free for all. But we have approved. We have approved software. But honestly, if a teacher can make a good case, and there's especially a group of teachers that are showing there's an instructional benefit for doing that, it's rarely turned down.
And I'm in support of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
I'm not sure I have a lot to offer. I am in support of the budget, and to kind of follow Tom's statement, what I'm excited for is to to budget for a, quote, normal school year next year. Our kids are going to be in school full time. They're going to see their teachers every day. They're going to have homework every day. And I hope that that's going to help with a lot of the behavior issues that we're seeing in all the schools. And I hope that you know, with the resources that we're budgeting for and the people that we'll have supporting our kids, that they'll feel comfortable in school and things can settle down and we can really look to support ourselves, whether it's with the students and in our community, and really kind of come together. And, you know, this community has really been divided over the last couple of years. And I think this budget and having kids at the school and even football and more theater is really going to help everyone to really get engaged and get behind all the good things that are going on at all of our schools and all the good things our administrators and teachers are doing. So.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just going to go in order if that's okay with you folks. So I am in support of the budget, but there's a couple things, and echoing a few of my colleagues, I'm shocked at the healthcare coming in at a 0. When you put an 8 in, I never believed it would be an 8. I always thought that it would be double digit, and but I'm often wrong, so that's okay. I think that the piece that we do not talk about enough, and you touched on it tonight, is the process with which somebody gets family health insurance in this district, because it is not just granted. It's the process that you put in place makes sure that we're not expending dollars that we don't have to. Talking about software, and this is something that came up with the Finance Committee quite a bit. I think every year should have a software audit. You see it in the corporate world all the time. Things become dormant, unused, and the rigor behind that is something that I would like to see. And I mean, this is my last dance here, so hopefully somebody can pick up that mantle. You know the process that we take as a committee, going line by line. And I stare at that number, and I like where it has gone, and you always would like it to be lower, but not at the cost of sacrificing the educational experience for the community. And I know that everybody on that committee looks at those numbers very, very closely and tries to expend the dollars that we are entrusted with to the best extent possible. Scott's tired of me bringing up things like P&C insurance and talking about you know, if there are places where we can periodically get competitive bids, we can. I know that we do well with that. I know that you have your thumb on what we buy as insurance, but I know that it would be interesting to ensure that we always have the most competitive prices on those things that are open in the marketplace. And I know that you've done that with the healthcare. That's it. I think that you both did fine work on this, and I do appreciate it. Peter?
On a macro basis, I too support the budget. In my previous time on the school board, I served on 12 budget committees, and I was pleased to be put back on it this year, and I must say from my years of experience that this is one of the most enjoyable committees that I've served on. That there were hours that were invested by Kevin, Jennifer, and myself, and mega hours with Scott, and a lot of back and forth. This budget did not come together without a lot of debate. As far as specific stuff, I think we needed to up our game in HR, and I think we've done that. We're entirely too big a district to kind of be using chewing gum and baling wire and extra people to try to keep an HR organization going. So I was very comfortable we did that, and I know Jennifer has been involved more deeply with a lot of the changes that we're making in the high school, and I'm hoping that again those expenditures are going to bear fruit. On the infamous drama, I think that given again the 2 stipended play positions, I think we do need to sort through what this new position is going to be. And I think the other K factor that I got introduced to tonight is really the technology end of the drama. And my understanding, and got introduced to him tonight, that we have a new technical person that's quite familiar with a lot of the equipment that we have here. I mean, in my opinion, the new low was when I went into the National Honor Society celebration that they had 3 weeks ago, and the audio didn't work and nobody knew what the hell to do about it. And about that time I finally lost it and got chewed out for my wife by not totally going through the chain of command, but I was sufficiently pissed off, and I'm glad to see this new person, and I think it's going to, so I think we need a year to sort out all these positions, but I think, but the other part of it too with this is also the management of what we've got, and we've got to have all of the organizations within the within this, specifically the music department, that's pulling the same oars as the drama, and I think that's going to take some management, and it needs to be done. But other than all of that, I have no problem defending this budget to the good people of Cumberland and North Yarmouth. That's all I have.
Thank you, Peter. Jason.
We need a dump button for you.
Well, you'll get one in 2 months, so be careful with what you wish for.
In no particular order, the drama position, halftime is great, and I would encourage us from the beginning to encourage that person to take advantage of being the play person as well and get those stipends. I can't imagine, well, I can imagine there's a lot of benefit from having the same person do it all and make it that much more successful, so that the next year going full-time is an easy sell. Thank you, Scott, for that explanation, and the guy left now, but that those questions, I've gotten those sorts of questions from other community members, talking about rolling over these big numbers and sort of the explanation around that, and he's kind of right to a degree. There are people that are paying forward, but you know, we try to level out the highs and the lows, but that's very good. Like, more of that sort of explanation I think would help a lot of people with a $44 million budget. You know. I'm pleased with the health reduction, obviously, and I'm pleased that we put all that money back in and didn't try to spend it. So I guess one question, how if somebody wants to see greater detail of the numbers, because even at 1,000 lines long, it's every one of these lines sums up hundreds, dozens or hundreds of lines. How does somebody get to see greater detail?
Specifically what areas? Like, what are you talking about? Just any area? We have details of supplies and equipment and textbooks, and you know, we have those details. We have details of staffing. I mean, if somebody was really interested, we could provide that level of detail.
So just an email, basically, and they could
ask us for the request, and we'll produce whatever there is.
Okay, much appreciated. I feel very good about this budget. I thank you to Jeff, Scott, and Finance Committee rolling this up. I mean, 4.67% in the current climate. It's hard not to be pleased with that. And I'm as frugal as they come, but you know, people start picking at numbers here and there, kind of small numbers in the grand scheme of things. And my only answer to that is, yeah, we could chase $5,000 or $10,000 here or there, but I think the average person in the community, when it came right down to it, and you asked them whether it was $1 on their $1 or a penny on their tax bill versus taking $500 out of the classroom, you know, to me, somewhere you sort of draw a line. So I feel very good about this. I appreciate the comments from the community, and I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vanessa.
Well, I do echo everyone's sentiment on the Finance Committee and working so hard, and I know the 3 people that are working on it will not be here. So we've got big shoes to fill coming up. Question on the theater position. What would the cost be for a full-time position plus the stipend? Like what?
Yeah, so we use about 85,000 for
Okay.
everything all in, for benefits and all.
Okay.
As a place, that's, so I think we listed it at 42.5, if I did my math right, for a half-time position.
Okay.
And then you'd have to add about 17 for benefits to that, 45 plus 17.
Yeah.
So we're basically looking at a $90,000 position for,
So, yeah, right, 85 was, depends on the experience that we're hiring. We really have, it's all over the place for experience.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
have 0% experience, or we have 10 years experience.
all
And
right.
that does make a
I kind of
difference.
want to just get a full number
Yeah.
for that full-time position. Explain a little bit more about the voting ballot, and it's coming up that we don't.
Every 3 years.
Is that, do we just vote on it because we're 2 towns, or is that how every town operates?
No, it's, Maine requires that.
Okay.
Basically, every district has to decide whether you're municipal or SAD or whatnot, do you want to continue going through the referendum vote each year? But because we have a district budget meeting, we're different from Yarmouth, which is municipal, where their town council votes on it, but then there's still a referendum vote. So every district has the opportunity every 3 years to say, yes or no, we want to continue doing this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the only place in America you get to vote twice on
Yes,
something
Scott
where you
likes
weren't
to say
sure.
that.
That's what I was going to, why we
That's true.
vote twice. Very excited that you guys have now support in the central office for the HR. Scott and Jeff, I think what you guys do and the roles that you take on and all of the ins and outs, I think that's going to be somewhat a relief for you guys a little bit to take that off. Happy that we kept a lot of line items for the ed techs. We increased, I feel like I'm echoing now, that was increased, that we have more ed techs, especially at Maple I. Wilson. Very excited that you got the mill rate down for North Yarmouth. Someone asked what we were excited about. That was going to be a hard go out to the public if that's where it was going to land. And I am in full support of the budget. So thank you.
Yes, I was very happy about North Yarmouth too, because
Yes, it was
I
very
think when I
exciting.
presented it on March 21st, it was $1.29.
Yeah.
And now we're at, down at, what, 67 cents, so.
And they're still looking at valuation to see whether
They're
it's
still searching to see if that number goes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you have something else?
The only thing that I wanted to say is that we have May 2nd coming up, where we have to vote to adopt the budget and sign the warrants to be prepared for June 14th. So the process that'll go forward from here is, since I'm hearing consensus, I think, around the budget at this point, is we'll prepare the warrants, run them through legal counsel, and we'll also have the warrant for the revolving renovation funds that'll get signed on May 2nd as well. So that was what we needed to accomplish tonight. So thank you, Kevin.
Yes.
And the board.
Mike?
2 quick things. Early voting also, I think it starts, did you say May 14th? It's a month before, 30 days before Election Day, which is June 14th this year, or is it June?
June 14th.
14th.
Okay, so then it's May 14th is when early voting could begin. So
And that would be only on the budget validation, I mean, not the budget validation, but only on the revolving renovation funds. If the community can't turn in an absentee ballot on the district budget prior to the district's budget meeting on the 19th. So it's a timing issue. It's a problem with state statute. It's not a problem with what the district does. It's a problem with how it lines up with the election and with statute around that.
Yeah.
So the community, if you do absentee ballot, you can't turn in your absentee ballot for the district budget until after the district budget meeting on the 19th, because that's where the budget is voted on by the community, and that's the budget that you would be voting on at the polls.
So probably starting on the 20th, knowing Tammy and the folks in Cumberland Town Hall and the folks in North Yarmouth.
So that's why.
The 20th would be the time to start voting.
To return them.
Yes.
If they return them early, they're voided.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask. Thank you. Also, when we thank Mr. Moriarty for his kind note, we should note that this problem exists. And the other thing I wanted to say, I was remiss in not saying thank you to Scott, Jeff, Kevin, Jennifer, and Peter for all your work on this. Really good. Appreciate it.
I would like to add that we did have a meeting, Scott and I had a meeting with both town managers, and I don't remember if there's people from the finance committee, this was a few weeks ago, to talk about this whole issue of the absentee balloting and just kind of going through that and explaining why we can't help with that. And the town clerks were there as well. And this, because this issue comes up perennially, and really went through it, and I think Scott did a nice job explaining state statute and the kind of the steps we have to take and why the timing isn't right. And I think the legislative delegation might want to get some more information about it. I know Steve and Kathy especially have asked questions about it. So
yeah, it's a burden on every community that has to follow that rule, that statute. Okay, thank you. You have what you need to start typing.
I do, thank you.
Beautiful, okay. Let's move to the superintendent's report.
all right, I know the evening is getting late, so I'll try to go quickly. So tonight's superintendent's report has two quick areas that I just wanted to highlight. One of them is on social media, and there's no way to present this, so it's going to be presented the way it is, unfortunately. But we've had a lot of activity actually in the district over the last few weeks, even though this is the first day back after a break. I want to just call out Connie Russell's second graders. I just thought if you have a chance, this is on our social media platforms, but if you have a chance to just look at this 2-minute video, it will completely make your day. I will not play it right now though, but they did an amazing job with these little birdies, and they almost look real. It's amazing. I want to congratulate Coach Derek Soul of the baseball team. 300th win in how many years he's been coaching. I think it's like 25 years almost. He's been coaching. They had a game tonight, but this was the game from last week where they had, this was the 300th win. I'd like to also just say congratulations to the 4th and 5th graders. GMS 4-5, along with students in Yarmouth, raised $45,000 for the refugees from the Ukraine. Just an amazing amount of money, and it was picked up by the Forecaster. It was on the front page, made its way into the Press Herald. Really great, wonderful story. A couple other things right before the break. Mark Jacinius, who is an alumni of Greeley High School, now works for Johns Hopkins and NASA, and came and talked with students at the middle school and the high school about his project that he's working on with NASA called DART, which is to deflect, help with having missiles deflect an asteroid that might be coming into Earth in the near, whenever it is, in the far future, not near future. Just letting you know that there's nothing that we were told. It is a preventative measure only. And they're actually, all of the work that Mark and his team have been doing at NASA, they are actually test modeling in September. And our students, hopefully, we talked with him while he was here about doing some live feeds on the day that they actually launch. It's actually, it simulates some sort of a missile deployment, but it's actually a small space shuttle that goes into space and will land on the asteroid and actually get and collect data from the asteroid. And it's really amazing. It was fascinating. He talked to the middle school 8th grade science classes and the high school astronomy class as well. It's great. He's talking about his days here at Greeley High School and Greeley Middle School. We also 8th graders at the middle school were able to live feed in and they talked with Governor Janet Mills right before the break. Asked questions, and she was live with a few classes in Maine. And we had 2 groups of students from 8th grade who were able to talk with her. So that was great. And finally, we have 3 students who are at Southern Maine Community College, are actually there on campus taking courses as part of our dual course program that we offer through our guidance office. So just wanted to make you aware of that as well. So those are some of the things going on in the district. Of course, there's a lot of other things. Also just want to give you a quick update on the GGG plan, and I'm hoping that this is the last, I put final, that this should be the last update I give you, unless you choose for me to keep coming with updates. I know that most of you are enjoying this and would like me to keep doing this. So I'll go very briefly through it since I know that you've seen many of it. So in terms of COVID cases, we've had 76 since the last time I reported, which was almost 2 months ago now. So you can see that the numbers in our district are slowing just as they are in the state. We had 31 more positive pools over the last 6 weeks as well in our district. So again, really slowing, and so some changes are coming, even with some of the things that we're doing in our protocols this spring still. You can see that our case counts have really been dropping dramatically, and inched up a little bit before the last 2 weeks before the break, but just incrementally. And we've had students out with symptoms and testing positive, but again, very low numbers compared to where we were. Our daily attendance hasn't changed that much since the last time I reported it. 5 to 8% daily for students. It was a little bit up before the break, and I think some of it may have not had anything to do with COVID. It might have had something more to do with vacation mode. And our staff absences still are a little bit higher than our student absences, but still below 10%. So at this point, we're continuing to do a lot of just the preventative, cleaning, sanitation, ventilation, distancing when students come back in days 6 to 10, and then masking when they come back days 6 to 10 after testing positive and being out for 5 days. And we'll continue to report the COVID cases on our website as we've been doing weekly. But we're adding a lot of stop measures. As you'll see, the ones in red are stop. Going forward, we already stopped the other things prior to this. So we will no longer be reporting student and staff absences or tracking those. We're not going to be continuing with pool testing, and that was a state decision. The last week will be May 9th through 13th, and we'll be discontinuing that program. I'd like to thank all of the families who jumped in, and we had so many, over 60% of our students and staff participated in pool testing this year, which really was very helpful, especially during the height of the pandemic in the middle of the year. We'll no longer be tracking vaccination rates, and the state has signaled that the SOP, which will be kind of the final pieces of the pandemic and protocols for students coming back. The state is signaling that they may retire the SOP at the end of the school year. So we'll be waiting to hear that. They did put that kind of little inkling out before the break. So going forward, there is no advisory group meeting. That group has been retired with thanks. The next GGG update to the board, there is none. This is the last scheduled update unless the board asks for one, which I'll gladly provide the information. If a COVID issue arises, it follows your approved plan from March, which would be that I would alert the board, and the board would then take it from there and decide on what the next step would be. And then what about the GGG plan? Unless the board is really upset about it, I'm planning to retire the GGG plan in its entirety when school gets over on June 17th, and only reactivate it if the need arises. And I know that some of you are very disappointed to hear that. And in all seriousness, a lot of the good measures that we have put into place since COVID happened we'll certainly be continuing with. I think we've done a lot of work with HVAC, keeping up with air filtration filters, and we'll probably will not keep the air filtration HVAC systems on full throttle next year. But those are the things that we'll be looking at and making sure that we have cleaning, sanitation. I think we have a lot of protocols that will just are good practice health-wise that we'll certainly be continuing with. But the need for an actual plan going forward, I don't see the necessity of doing that. So I know that some of you are really disappointed, but this will be the last scheduled report for GGG going forward this year. Anybody object? Do you object, Kevin? No, but it's helped us a lot this year. We appreciate the board's support on this plan. I think having the regular updates has helped people that had questions. I know people have gone to those, have asked questions and been referred to it, and have gotten the answers that they've needed. So I think it's brought in some clarity, transparency to what we've been doing with COVID. And we tried to provide as much information as possible that we have. So I do think it had its place, but I also think that all good things must come to an end.
Okay. Excellent. No, okay. Thank you, Jeff. I like the new format, too. Okay, that leads us into committee reports. I think Finance has done enough tonight, other than to remind you of a couple things. Then we are here to sign a whole bunch of paper next week after we have the adoption of the budget vote. That will be here. The district budget meeting is on Thursday, May 19th at 7 o'clock. It will also be in here. And then the referendum vote, as we've discussed, is going to be on Tuesday, June 14th, or by absentee ballot, which of course cannot be handed in until after the 20th, or the 20th or after. That's Finance. Oh, and again, to thank Jennifer and Peter. It's going to be a fun year for you, and you can leverage all the financial acumen you can have, but we were fortunate enough to have Jennifer with a phenomenal background as a CPA. We were fortunate to have Peter with the background of a CFO, and Mr. Poulin and Jeff. Really great working with you this year.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Kevin for your leadership of the Finance Committee. Those regular meetings, many hours the Finance Committee put in to the budget. So thank you for steady leadership, and to the Finance Committee, Jennifer and Peter, for all of your work. That's a really heavy lifting group every year. It's a big task.
Thank you. To policy, and in Ann's absence, so we've got a couple things happening tonight, but the first reading of policy BED, remote participation in school board meetings. Jeff, I'm going to ask you to share every thought you ever had about that new policy that's being proposed.
Yeah, and I think Mike was actually queued up, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have something we don't normally do is do a first and second read today, and it's because of the nature of this policy. One, we don't think it's controversial. We've worked it through very intricately with Drummond Woodson. And two, it's really needed. It's about remote participation in board meetings, including subcommittee meetings. The governor's emergency order allowed us to do remote participation in board meetings very clearly. That expired. We then were operating, certainly not anything wrong, but there was no clear policy that established what we could do under state statute. And so this is rectifying that. And so we needed to go through this process to establish what our policy is for how we operate remotely or not. And so this establishes that we generally don't, save for a few exceptions. The existence of an emergency, which is an emergency by the state, or an emergency deemed, a local emergency deemed by the board chair in consultation with the superintendent. And then the second one is illness or temporary absence of sorts, and it's written out in there. So that's effectively it. Happy to answer questions. Again, it's not something we would normally do to do a first and second read, but given the tightness of the schedule this year, the work on the budget, and the need for this to be in place to make sure that we can do our work, especially subcommittee work, remotely if need be, hence why we're asking to put it up as a first and second read at the same time.
So the only, oh, please.
Also note that we do have the lawyer look at it once we've done our revisions, that we always go back to our lawyer to go back to the lawyer on these policies, that we just don't write them and present them. We have the lawyer look at them, we have edits, and then we go back and re-edit. So it's not like we formulated this policy and is putting it in front of the board for a first and second read.
Yeah, it is weird. I hear you this way and this way, so I could not hear you. But yes, you're exactly correct.
So the only question that I have now, we do have a compressed schedule. We have the meeting tonight, which we've all enjoyed, and then we will be together next Monday. And my only concern of going a first and second on anything, something that may feel like, I mean, it's a foregone conclusion, is just the compression of that. If any of our colleagues on the board want to go deeper, if anybody in the community would like to read that, I don't like doing them both in one meeting. It's just my perspective on it, and I'm not trying to be difficult.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I think it's a good policy, and if we weren't meeting for 3 or 4 weeks, but I'm a great one who's afraid of precedents, and you know, where this may make sense right now, we could have something come up 6 months from now that might bite us in the rear end. So, but all due respect, but I know why you're trying to do it.
Yeah.
Can we have, oh, go ahead, jeez.
So this seems logical to me. I have no great issues with it. Is it required by law because of what we're doing, I guess, or it's not like a new state thing that we have to implement?
I don't, it's not actually required.
It is required, well, it's required by law if you want to have a remote meeting.
Yeah.
Because the governor's emergency order. So before, there was no, you could never have a remote meeting before the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, everybody's having them because the governor allowed it. And then her order ended, of course, last June, and then technically, nobody's supposed to be having remote meetings. Now, a lot of districts in the state occasionally had one and didn't realize. Good. And then, obviously, our legal counsel said you got to have a policy in order to do this. So that's why we've been trying to get this policy prepared.
So in general, this doesn't force the entire meeting to be remote. It just allows somebody to be remote if they need it because of illness, whatever. But it doesn't force the entire
I think
meeting.
if I remember correctly, and I have to look at it exactly in front of me, but I believe if one member of the board is unable to be there, the entire meeting can be remote. Can be remote. Doesn't have to be, but can be. And I think that applies more to I think the discussion was around subgroups or subcommittees, yes, and not the full board necessarily.
But it doesn't say that explicitly, I don't believe.
We did ask our legal counsel to clarify that, and I think it's...
Okay.
Well, it's on the second page where we talk about a member of the board who participates remotely in a public meeting is considered present for purposes of a quorum and voting. The paragraph before that talks about the different means of that.
So, Jeff, I have your language that describes our discussion with the attorney. So, 2 ways the law allows remote meetings, and these apply to subcommittees of the board as well. In seeking clarification from the legal counsel on committee meetings, as long as one member of a committee exercises one of the exceptions, then the entire committee can meet remotely. This can be an ongoing arrangement as long as the exception can be met. In other words, committees can meet remotely if at least one member of the committee asks for the exception to be applied.
Right, and that was the narrative from our attorney on how to interpret that. Yes.
Yeah.
I guess my only concern is I feel strongly that it's important that the public be able to be involved when able. And I would hate for this to be abused from a couple of standpoints, like the public can't have a meaningful exchange. I mean, Zoom just isn't as good. And then the other thing, I guess, you know, any one individual could then, you know, abuse it, I guess, and then not show up and be here. And again, it's harder to have a meaningful conversation when you're not in person. So those are my concerns. I think it's pretty well written, but that's it.
I would agree with what you're saying, Jason, that I feel that the way that it's written in, and I'm not sure if we really want to get into the details of it, but saying that at the top it says, if you give adequate advance notice, that it's fine, and that you'll be forced to be remote. Let me just find.
So
and I'm just saying it sounds like it's too open-ended. And I would fear that probably what Jason is saying is that meetings, if one person can't attend, like we have tonight, I don't think this meeting should be remote. But someone could take this and change the whole feel of what these meetings are through this. And I know what we're trying to accomplish is we need to have a meeting. We can't all come together. We need to get, you know, move something along so we can all do it Zoom, or, you know, there's an illness going through, and this is supposed to be kind of a kind of strategy to get into place every once in a while. Would that be correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I was thinking, I think that's a great way of looking at it, because I think we're trying to, what would, like, especially, like, there's two different things going on, the full board, and then there's subgroups or subcommittees. And with a full board, I can see that all of a sudden we have to have a meeting, people's schedules are busy, some people are on the road, and it might just be easier. It was an unscheduled meeting. It wasn't scheduled, but we've got to have one. The chair is trying to organize a meeting, and it might just be easier to do it remotely. Now, the public has access to that meeting, just like they would if they were coming to a meeting. It's different, obviously. It's on a screen. The other situation that I can think of is if there was a snowstorm or some sort of storm, or we could otherwise hold the meeting remotely and not have to cancel it. And so that would be another situation for the full board. I think for subgroups, and this is where we had a lot of conversation with our attorney, subcommittees, I mean, of the board, that there is a little bit more flexibility. If somebody is working and not able to go to subcommittees and they're on a subcommittee, can that subcommittee meet more remotely than in person if they need to?
Which most of our subcommittees are doing this year.
Right.
And it does help. I think I feel more comfortable around the subcommittees. I don't feel comfortable around the full board with pushing it into remote. And I'm not sure if that's just around the language of it, but I know that in 5 years, this conversation will be interpreted, this document will be interpreted differently by the people that sit up here. And I would hate for it to be used in a different way, that people can't come and see face to face, and that we're forced more remotely.
Yeah, and I think I think, Mike, I think we were talking about exactly that, especially full board meetings. The priority has always got to be in person.
Right. So I would like that written in some way.
Yeah, I think it's a fair critique, and it's something where I think the intent of the policy committee was that this is a backstop.
Yeah.
And it's not anything else. So it's something where I think we can go back to this, and I'm just hearing already the concern about moving it tonight. That's fine with me. We can push it and do the second read next week. But in the top, members of the board are expected to be physically present for board meetings, except when being physically present is not practicable. We could easily do something like in rare circumstances or something along those lines, and think about ways to improve that language, and any other pieces to just add in to make it so that the board meetings in particular should be a rare occurrence for remote participation.
Right. It should be more in an emergency type situation, and not necessarily the emergency word, but in that vein of some sort.
Yeah, and number one is clear, I think, in that regard. Number two, I think it's where the exception is where we would need to make it so it's a rarity, because that's about illness, physical condition, or temporary absence from the area.
Potentially, I thought that maybe that should only be invoked in the case of where a quorum couldn't be had by people in person, you know.
We talked about that as a possibility too, yeah.
So when this comes up for an item for action, which is going to be in mere moments, the procedure is a motion and a second, and then the motion to table to a specific date if that works for the body. So
For the second one.
correct, when that comes up in a few seconds. So I just wanted to put that out, and it doesn't have to go that way, but that's the procedure. You have a second thing.
Yes. So wanted to note, Jeff had put this out in his newsletter, Policy ACA. It's been worked through in the Equity Leadership Committee. It was discussed in the meeting with Lawrence Alexander. It's been out there quite a bit. I think starting last June, is that right, when it first came out? And then and the notice, just noting for folks that we are going to be taking it up in Policy Committee on May 2nd at 5 o'clock. So if anybody's interested in joining a Policy Committee, listening in, please let us know.
So what's the expected schedule on this going forward? Like when will the first read be? Or, and just to start, it's like major improvement from where we started, where you had to be a mind reader in order to not be mean or whatever. So, but what's the schedule going forward?
I'll take no. Yeah, I was not part of that's in the Equity Committee draft. It's only now coming to the Policy Committee, so they get all kudos. I chuckled at your question about schedule, and Vanessa, hopefully you can understand why I'm chuckling, because I'm not sure. Sometimes we put a policy in front of us in the Policy Committee, and 4 minutes later, we're like, this makes sense, these two tweaks, let's go, move it to the full committee. Sometimes it takes 3 meetings. So I don't want to assume. I really don't. I think I'll know more after next week.
Yeah.
Okay. So how should board members and community members relay concerns about this, or how should input come to the Policy Committee on concerns?
Yeah, that's a delightful question, Jason. And I meant to say this beforehand, so thank you for asking that. In Jeff's email to the community in the newsletter, and we can circulate this again, there's a Google form if you want to go through that route. If you'd rather just contact folks directly, they can email Ann, they can email me, they can email Vanessa, anybody on the Policy Committee. Our emails are first initial, last name. Ann's last name is on the website for anybody. I'm not going to try to spell it. So just reach out directly to us or fill out the Google form.
Or attend on May 7th.
Or, inquire about attending. Yeah.
It'll be back in the newsletter this Thursday as well. We put it in the newsletter the Thursday before break. I'm sure some people didn't see it going off to vacation if they were off, but it'll be back in the newsletter on Thursday.
In general, I think that I liked what Lawrence Alexander said about, sort of implementing or integrating some of this into your mission statement. And a lot of this, I think some of these statements here to me are just like, of course, that's the way it should be. And I wonder if this is really what we should be doing, is building a policy like this that isn't required, and maybe many parts of this could simply be integrated into pieces of our mission statement and strategic priorities, because to me they just seem, a lot of it seems like no-brainers, but then there's other parts of it that, I think make assumptions, and I don't like some of the statements. So
yeah, I think some of the language that was added to this policy around citizenship, global citizenship, comes straight from, vision statements and mission statement, stuff like that. The board hasn't revisited for a few years, but it's been in place. And it really, it's almost kind of like timeless statements that.
It's a major improvement. I just think we need to move very carefully and make sure that the statements that we're making are truly, surely having the effect that we intend. And to me, some of the logic is backwards. Over and over and over, telling a group that they're equal doesn't make that group feel equal.
Yeah, and I think that was where Lawrence, in our Let Us Consult, as I put in the email, really helped us get back to your mission. Make sure you're starting with your mission in mind. What do you want kids to be able to do? What is equity really about? Equity is about making sure all of our students are ready for their future, whatever that means. If they're going to college, if they're not going to college, going to gap year, whatever it is, the trades, military, they are ready for global citizenship in any way. And that is the mission. That's our mission. That's the mission of a school, is to do that. Equity is one tool that you use, and it's really encompassing. So I think that reminder, and actually that is where we started the equity work, whatever it was, 3 years ago. That actually was where we started. And, we took a long journey to get back to it, but I think it was a good reminder that that's what we need to be continuously asking ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Facilities, Peter.
We have a meeting at 9:30 tomorrow morning, and we're going to probably do two things. One, kind of go off Tyler's list of 5 questions, that 5 areas of discussion regarding the building project in North Yarmouth. And at this point in time, you folks know as much as I do, so we will do that. We also have received a draft agreement for Sharps Field from North Yarmouth. Our attorney has reviewed it, has comments, and we'll discuss that also. So you folks from North Yarmouth are getting hounded by your folks, as the Wicked Witch of the West says, in due time, we will deal with it. That's all.
Wicked Witch of the West. That's a first for me. Curriculum.
There is no update. We have not held a meeting since last board meeting.
Thank you. Communications.
There's not really an update. Just one thing Jeff didn't note is that we were mentioned in the forecaster this week because Jeff proactively reached out to the folks at the forecaster with a few good things, and they reported on the work of folks raising money for the Ukrainian refugees.
Very good. Equity. Who else is on that? I know Tyler.
I'm on it, but we have not met since our last board meeting.
Okay. And Madison ran off to do a lot of homework, so we will bypass student reports. Any ad hoc updates by anybody? Excellent. So that brings us to items for action. The one in front of us is regarding looking for a motion to approve policy BED, remote participation in school board meetings as presented.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second. Wait, so.
This is door number 1.
Door number 1.
Right. And then, okay.
That is the second reading piece. So now.
Move to table this until May 2nd.
And I'll second.
Is there a second? We need 2/3 on that. All in favor? Any discussion?
Is May 2nd enough time?
I think so.
Yeah.
You think so?
I do. Because I don't know, well.
We can email you our concerns, right?
I'm just saying it's 1 week. Do you want till the following one?
It won't be enough time if you want to make changes and then
Right.
edits and then send it to the lawyer, so we're going to have to push that off.
Do we need a date to table it?
No.
You don't.
And which is why we were trying to do a second read today, because
I'll amend my motion to not include a date.
we need to move this forward.
If you can get us some stuff in the next couple days, we could then send to Drummond Woodson as soon as possible.
But maybe no date is good.
Right. So if you can get done what you need to get done, we'd be in fine shape for next week. Otherwise, what's our meeting after the 2nd? You have that committed to memory?
We don't have one until the 1st of June because we have the district budget meeting on the 19th.
Okay. If only we had a policy that would let us meet remotely. Do you think that you can try to reach out and if there are any edits?
And then
We've been operating for months this way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a revised motion. Is there a second?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yes, so we're not putting a date on this, we're tabling it for the future that potentially it's not going to get passed or on the books for this year.
You are, if the questions that the board has can be answered by the 2nd, I think that we can take that up on the 2nd.
Okay.
If not, we can take that up on the first meeting in June.
So we can do the second read on the 2nd? Okay. And so everyone's willing to email questions within the next 2 days,
Yep.
Okay.
if not sooner?
What do you
Okay.
think, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I wasn't sure what the questions were, but I think it will depend on
Either
how
was
many
fine.
questions there are and if the policy committee needs to discuss again and meet. And
Hopefully, it's very simple and straightforward.
if it's minor, we can ask legal counsel if it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Or if bring it back to a meeting, a policy meeting.
Do you guys feel comfortable that some of the concerns brought up could be addressed?
From what I understand about just adding some language about rarity of use, yes. But I can't read your mind, Jason, so.
Yeah. I mean, the other one about quorum, like if we don't need a quorum, then I'm just not sure we need to go through that hassle. Like, we've got 2 members that aren't here tonight.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
So adding a caveat for a quorum and then adding a disclaimer at the top about rarity, I don't know, I think it seems simple enough to me, Jeff.
It seems simple, but if there, I guess I would ask, would you like the policy committee to have that directly from board members since it went to policy committee? Or do you want to just take it from what you've heard tonight?
I would like emails sent to us directly,
Okay.
specifically what they're looking for.
I think that would
'Cause-
make more sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was pretty clear on the policy, and that's why we brought it to you for a second read. And what you guys are asking for, I'm still a little bit unclear. So if you could write it out in a
So it'd be better.
short
Yep.
email, Jason?
Short, come on.
Bullet points.
Just highlight.
I think that's probably the best
If
process.
that would be helpful for us
I
to
move the
this.
question.
All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, passed unanimously. Thank you. So we need to consider 2022-23 professional positions. These are GMS 6-8 Special Ed Resource Room, GMS 4-5 Special Ed Resource Room. I'd be looking for a motion to approve appointing Marco D'Angelo to the position of GMS 6-8 Special Education Resource Room Teacher as recommended by the superintendent.
So move.
And is there a second?
Second.
Jeff, anything that you want to add?
No, these are replacement positions that we have, or we have one retirement, one resignation. So we're filling those positions.
Excellent, thank you. Any additional questions? All those in favor? Opposed? 7-0. How about a motion to approve appointing Brittany Prokey to the position of GMS 4-5 Special Education Resource Room Teacher as recommended by the superintendent?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. And finally, looking for a motion to enter executive session to discuss negotiations between MSAD 51 school secretaries, educational technicians, and library technicians and the MSAD 51 Board of Directors pursuant to state statute MRSA 405, subsection 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor? We're in the back row.